The bone has a wound in it, not a clean break from pressure in the rock, and not the random cracking that comes when stone shifts over millions of years. This mark has a shape. It has a direction. It was made when the bone still belonged to a living animal, or to an animal recently dead enough that flesh still clung to it. The surface is dark now, mineralized and cold, but the edges remember teeth. A fossil like this does not show the whole chase. It does not show the first turn of the prey animal, the weight of a predator closing from behind, or the moment when dust rose from a floodplain beneath running feet. It gives only the part that survived: a gouge, a puncture, a healed rim of bone, a tooth still buried where it should not be. The rest has to be rebuilt carefully, not as a story of monsters, but as evidence of hunger, risk, injury, and survival. Dinosaur battlefields are rarely battlefields in the human sense.
They are not places where armies met or where winners stood over the defeated.
They are river bends, drought-stricken ponds, coastal flats, ash-covered forests, sand dunes, nesting grounds, and bone beds where ordinary lives were interrupted. Predators came because prey was there. Prey gathered because water, food, shelter, or eggs drew them together. Then, mud, sand, flood, volcanic ash, or simple burial preserved the aftermath. A three-toed footprint crossing a larger track can look dramatic. A skeleton of a predator beside a herbivore can invite a violent reconstruction. But paleontology is careful with these moments. A predator near a carcass might have killed it, or scavenged it, or died later in the same trap. A bite mark might record an attack or feeding after death. A bone bed full of animals might preserve a herd, or a drought, or a river that carried remains together from far away. The evidence speaks, but it rarely speaks in complete sentences. This is why the subject matters. Predation is not just a scene of attack. It is one of the forces that shaped dinosaur bodies. It shaped the horns of ceratopsians, the tail clubs of ankylosaurs, the plates and spikes of stegosaurs, the speed of small ornithopods, the heavy skulls of tyrannosaurs, the sickle claws of dromaeosaurs, the herd movements recorded in trackways, and even the timing of growth. In the Mesozoic, survival was built into bone. The Mesozoic world lasted long enough for countless versions of this struggle to appear and disappear. In the Triassic, early dinosaurs lived among other archosaurs that often dominated the land around them. In the Jurassic, giant sauropods moved across floodplains where allosaurs and other theropods waited for weakness.
In the Cretaceous, hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, ankylosaurs, tyrannosaurs, dromaeosaurs, and many smaller animals lived within ecosystems as complex as any modern wilderness, but made from different bodies, different plants, and different rules. If these journeys into the dinosaur age are what bring you back to Jurassical, subscribing keeps the next one close. The title sounds violent, and sometimes the fossil record is violent. There are specimens where a predator and prey seem to have died while locked together. There are bones with healed injuries that prove an animal survived a bite from something powerful enough to puncture deep. There are tooth marks on ribs, tail vertebrae, skulls, limb bones, and armor. There are trackways where animals crossed the same muddy surface within hours, maybe minutes of one another. But the larger picture is not endless combat. It is a world where living things tried to keep living. A battlefield can be a floodplain after a dry season, when water has retreated into a shrinking pool and animals from miles around come down to drink.
The mud at the edge is churned by feet. Small tracks overlap larger ones. A young herbivore steps too close to the reeds. A predator waits in shade or follows from open ground, or simply watches until exhaustion makes an animal easier to approach. When the rains finally return, A sudden flood tears through the basin and buries bones, plants, footprints, and the remains of meals beneath fresh sediment.
Another battlefield can be a dune field in late Cretaceous Mongolia. The air is dry, sand moves in sheets. A protoceratops lowers its head, stocky and powerful, built close to the ground. A velociraptor is near it, not the oversized creature of film, but a lean predator, roughly the size of a large turkey, with a curved claw raised on each foot. Something brings them together in the sand. The struggle ends so quickly that neither has time to separate before burial. That famous fossil does not tell us every motive. It does not prove that every velociraptor hunted protoceratops in the same way, or that the smaller animal always attacked prey so dangerous. It does show that the two animals interacted physically, violently, and that one extraordinary moment was entombed before decay could erase it. Most dinosaur behavior is inferred. This one is almost witnessed, but even here, the witness is stone. The same restraint applies to every ancient scene. A tooth embedded in a tailbone may prove that a predator bit a living animal if the bone healed around it. Without healing, the bite may have happened after death. A trackway may show animals moving together, but not necessarily cooperating. A cluster of predators around one herbivore may suggest group feeding, not organized hunting. The Mesozoic gives us evidence, and evidence is powerful precisely because it has limits. Still, when enough fragments are placed together, the world begins to move. A bitten hadrosaur tail, a sauropod trackway crossing wet limestone, a stegosaurus spike wound in a predator bone, shed teeth around a carcass, a skull crushed by pressure but still carrying scars from an earlier life. These are not decorations added to a prehistoric landscape. They are the marks of interaction. They show that dinosaurs were not isolated museum shapes. They met one another in real places, under real weather, with real consequences. Imagine a quarry face in the western United States, where the Morrison Formation lies exposed in dry light. The rock is pale, banded, and broken by seams of ancient floodplain sediment. From a distance, the cliff looks silent. Up close, it is crowded. Sauropod vertebrae, theropod teeth, stegosaurus plates, bits of turtle shell, crocodilian bone, plant fragments, and the fine texture of river deposits all sit in the same geological memory. The battle was not one fight. It was an ecosystem preserved unevenly, piece by piece. The Morrison Formation represents only a slice of the late Jurassic, but that slice is immense by human standards. Across what is now the western United States, rivers moved through seasonal landscapes, leaving behind mudstones, sandstones, and floodplain deposits. In those sediments, paleontologists have found some of the most familiar dinosaurs in the world: Allosaurus, Stegosaurus, Apatosaurus, Camarasaurus, Diplodocus, and others. These animals did not live as names. They lived as neighbors. A young sauropod in that world was not yet the walking fortress it might become. Its body was large compared with most animals, but small compared with its future. Its neck was still growing. Its bones were still strengthening. It fed low in the vegetation, among ferns, horsetails, cycads, and conifer seedlings. Nearby, adult sauropods could browse above it, lifting small heads from massive bodies into the green canopy. Size protected them with time, but time was exactly what the young did not yet have. Predators often live in the spaces between strength and weakness. A healthy adult sauropod was a dangerous target, not because it had horns or claws built for combat, but because of mass. A step from an animal weighing many tons could break ribs. A tail swing could injure. A fall could crush. For a theropod, the safer meal was the young one, the sick one, the trapped one, the animal separated from the group, the carcass found before other scavengers arrived.
Allosaurus belonged to that world. Its skull was lightened by openings in the bone, its jaws lined with serrated teeth, its body balanced over powerful hind limbs. It was not a tyrannosaur, and its killing equipment was different. Its teeth were cutting tools more than bone-crushing spikes. Its forelimbs were not useless stubs, but grasping limbs with claws. Its head and neck likely played major roles in attacking and feeding. The animal was built to cut flesh and exploit opportunity.
Opportunity is the word that matters. Predators are often imagined as constant attackers, but most cannot afford constant risk. Injury can be a death sentence. A broken leg, a damaged jaw, a deep wound that becomes infected, even a lost tooth at the wrong time can change a hunter's life. In living ecosystems, predators scavenge when they can, steal when possible, choose vulnerable prey when available, and avoid unnecessary danger. There is no reason to think Mesozoic predators were less practical. For prey, survival was not a single strategy. Some grew huge, some grew armor, some moved in groups, some nested in places where numbers reduced individual danger. Some relied on speed, camouflage, keen senses, or simply on reproducing enough that a species could endure losses its individuals could not. The fossil record does not preserve fear, but it preserves the structures built by fear across generations. A row of footprints can be as important as a skeleton. Bones tell us what an animal was. Tracks can tell us what it was doing. They show posture, stride, direction, speed, turning, slipping, limping, gathering, separating. A track is a body translated into mud. It records weight before it records death. In that sense, footprints are among the closest things paleontology has to living behavior. At Glen Rose in Texas, early Cretaceous trackways from the Paluxy River preserve the passage of large dinosaurs across ancient mud near a shoreline. In museum halls, slabs of those tracks became famous because they suggest movement through a real landscape rather than the stillness of mounted skeletons. Sauropod prints and theropod prints in the same limestone invite the mind toward pursuit, but the scientific reading is more cautious. The tracks show presence, direction, and timing within the same surface. They do not always prove a chase. The difference matters. A predator walking along a sauropod trackway may have followed scent or simply taken the same easy route across soft ground. A large herbivore might have passed hours before a theropod arrived. On some surfaces, overlapping prints record a busy place rather than a single event. Yet, even without a chase, the trackway is a battlefield of another kind. It is a place where prey and predator used the same corridor, the same mud, the same edge between land and water. Other track sites suggest groups moving together. Sauropods crossing a muddy plain, large individuals leaving broad impressions, smaller animals following. The herd not as a sentimental image, but as a practical arrangement. Herding does not make an animal safe. It changes the odds. It creates many eyes, many bodies, confusion for a predator, and a moving wall of weight. For a young animal, staying near the group could mean the difference between becoming a track and becoming a bone. The Mesozoic did not reward bravery. It rewarded survival long enough to reproduce. The animals that appear dramatic to us were not performing drama. A stegosaurus did not swing its tail to look iconic. A tyrannosaur did not bite because it was a symbol of power. A ceratopsian did not carry horns as a museum silhouette. These bodies were compromises made by evolution, shaped by feeding, display, movement, temperature, growth, reproduction, and the pressure of being eaten. A predator's tooth and a prey animal's armor are two sides of the same conversation. Neither evolves alone. A stronger bite matters because prey is difficult to subdue. A heavier skull matters because flesh, bone, and struggle resist it.
A tail club matters because something dangerous approaches from behind. A frill may serve display, muscle attachment, species recognition, thermoregulation, or defense, but in life, its meaning depended on the animal carrying it and the creatures facing it.
To follow dinosaur battlefields, then, is to follow evidence across time. It begins before the classic giant dinosaurs of the Jurassic, in the Triassic, when dinosaurs were not yet the unquestioned rulers of land. It moves through the Jurassic floodplains, where sauropods and large theropods made ecosystems on a scale unlike anything today. It passes into the Cretaceous, where flowering plants spread, seas rose and withdrew, continents shifted, and dinosaur communities became more varied, more regional, and often more heavily armed. The first battlefields were not crowded with Tyrannosaurus or Triceratops. They belonged to a different world. The Triassic was hot in many regions, seasonal, and shaped by the giant landmass of Pangaea. Early dinosaurs lived alongside pseudosuchians, relatives of crocodilians that occupied many roles later associated with dinosaurs. Some were apex predators. Some were armored herbivores. Some moved on 4 legs, others on 2. Dinosaurs were present, but they were not yet the whole story. For an early dinosaur, survival meant existing among stronger neighbors. The land was shared with animals whose bodies would seem unfamiliar even in a dinosaur documentary. Rauisuchians with deep skulls and powerful jaws, etosaurs with armored backs, phytosaurs in waterways, early pterosaurs in the air, cynodont relatives of mammals in the undergrowth. The Mesozoic did not begin with dinosaurs as kings. It began with a crowded recovery after the greatest extinction in Earth history, and with new experiments filling the world. Predation in that Triassic world would have been intense, but the evidence is less famous than the Cretaceous clashes. Trackways, scattered bones, teeth, stomach contents, and injuries suggest active ecosystems where early dinosaurs were both hunters and hunted. Small theropods chased smaller vertebrates and insects. Larger archosaurs took larger prey. Herbivorous dinosaurs moved through vegetation that contained no grass and no flowers, feeding among conifers, seed ferns, cycads, ginkgos, and horsetails. The Triassic ended with another extinction, less famous than the one that ended the dinosaurs, but enormously important for their rise. Many large archosaurs disappeared. Dinosaurs survived in enough lineages to expand into empty roles. After that boundary, during the Jurassic, the balance of land ecosystems changed. Dinosaurs became larger, more diverse, and more dominant. Their battlefields became dinosaur battlefields in a much fuller sense. The early Jurassic was not an instant kingdom. It was a long rebuilding. Rivers crossed landscapes that had been disturbed by climate shifts and volcanic activity. Plant communities changed. Ocean basins opened as Pangaea continued breaking apart. On land, theropods became more prominent predators, sauropodomorphs increased in size and specialization, and new herbivore lineages spread through environments still reorganizing after extinction. Over millions of years, the scale changed. The long-necked herbivores that began as modestly large animals became giants. Their necks reached higher, their bodies grew heavier, their limbs became columns. Their bones became pneumatic, filled with air spaces that helped lighten skeletons without destroying strength. Their breathing systems were likely efficient in ways inherited from dinosaur ancestors. Their digestive tracts processed huge amounts of plant material. Size became not just a feature, but a survival strategy. A sauropod reaching adulthood crossed an invisible boundary. Before that boundary, it was prey. After it, it became something closer to landscape. Predators could still threaten the weak, the wounded, or the trapped, but a healthy, full-grown sauropod was a terrible object to challenge. Its defense was not armor. Its defense was being too large to handle safely, too heavy to pull down,
too dangerous to misjudge. Somewhere in Jurassic mud, the young still walked between adult feet. Their prints would have been smaller, shallower, less certain. If a flood preserved them, we might see only the size difference and infer the rest. Adults moving through a low, wet area, juveniles within or near the group, the soft edges of prints sagging before burial. A herd is not just a group.
It is a moving field of protection, imperfect but meaningful.
The predators following such herds did not need to be villains. They were part of the same system. Without death, nutrients do not return. Without predators, weak and sick animals persist in ways that change populations. Without scavengers, carcasses remain unused. In modern ecosystems, predation is brutal at the level of the individual and necessary at the level of the whole. The Mesozoic was no different, even if the animals were stranger.
The word battlefield can make it sound as if life was divided into sides. Predator against prey, hunter against hunted. But many animals moved between those categories. A small theropod hunted lizards, mammals, insects, and young dinosaurs, while remaining vulnerable to larger theropods. A hatchling tyrannosaur, if it survived long enough to become one, began life as something that could be eaten. Even large predators may have been killed by rivals, disease, injury, floods, drought, or the teeth of their own kind. This is one of the quiet truths inside dinosaur fossils. Dominance was temporary. A tyrannosaur tooth could break. A horned dinosaur could survive one attack and die in another. A nest could be guarded and still fail. A herd could protect many young but lose one at the edge. The history of life is not a record of invincible animals. It is a record of vulnerability endured again and again. By the time the Jurassic reached its later chapters, some of the best-known dinosaur battlefields had taken shape across western North America. The Morrison Formation was not one uniform habitat. It included river channels, floodplains, ponds, lakes, seasonal wetlands, dry intervals, and forests of conifers, cycads, ginkgos, ferns, and horsetails. This was a landscape where water shaped preservation as much as life. A carcass on a floodplain begins changing almost immediately. Insects arrive. Small scavengers open skin or feed where wounds already exist. Larger predators may pull limbs, crush ribs, scatter vertebrae, and leave teeth behind. Sun dries exposed surfaces. Rain moves lighter bones. A river can carry parts away and deposit them with animals that never met in life. Then mud covers everything, and the story becomes both preserved and confused. This is why bone beds are difficult. They can be rich with fossils and poor in simple answers. A quarry full of Allosaurus bones does not automatically prove a pack died together. A high number of predators in one place might suggest a trap, repeated feeding, a drought location, a poisoned water hole, a quiet accumulation over time, or several processes working together. The evidence is not weak, it is complex. The Cleveland Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry, now part of Jurassic National Monument in Utah, is famous because so many fossils there belong to predators, especially Allosaurus. The concentration has invited explanations for decades. Predator trap, drought, mud, a carcass that lured hunters, water conditions that preserved bones in unusual abundance. The exact story remains debated, but the site reveals something essential. In the late Jurassic, predator and prey did not merely exist beside one another. They accumulated in the same dangerous places. Imagine the quarry before it was stone, a low place on a floodplain, mud soft enough to hold tracks, water present but maybe not clean or deep. The body of a herbivore decays near the edge, and smell moves through warm air. A theropod approaches, then another. They feed, step, slip, perhaps become mired,
perhaps leave and return. Over years or centuries, bones collect. The final quarry is not one moment, but many moments compressed until they look like one. Compression is one of the habits of deep time. A bone bed can seem like a single disaster because all the bones occupy one place in a museum display. But deposition can take seasons, decades, or longer. The Mesozoic does not always preserve scenes like photographs. More often, it preserves palimpsests, surfaces written over by water, weather, animals, and burial. To read them, paleontologists must separate event from accumulation. Yet even an accumulation has atmosphere. A broken femur, a tooth near a rib, a claw bone separate from its hand, a vertebra punctured and healed, a line of sediment showing water flow.
These details do not need exaggeration. They are enough.
They show that the dinosaurs of the Morrison were not just types of animal. They were individuals passing through wet seasons and dry seasons, growing, feeding, fighting, failing, and sometimes surviving damage that would have ended another life. Stegosaurus lived in this same world, and its body carried a different answer to predation. It did not become a mountain of flesh like the largest sauropods. It did not run like a small ornithopod. It stood on 4 limbs with a heavy body, a small head, plates along the back, and spikes at the end of the tail. Those spikes are often treated as ornament in popular images, but the evidence suggests they were functional weapons. A tail spike wound in an Allosaurus bone is one of the clearest reminders that prey could be dangerous. The wound is not a fantasy added to a skeleton. It is a physical trace of contact between animals, a strike strong enough to puncture bone. Whether that encounter happened during a hunt, a defensive swing, or another kind of clash, it shows that Stegosaurus was not simply meat waiting beneath plates. It could injure what attacked it. The plates of Stegosaurus are less straightforward.
They may have helped with display, species recognition, possibly thermoregulation, and perhaps other functions. They were not arranged like practical side armor.
But the tail spikes were different. A predator approaching the rear of a Stegosaurus entered a dangerous arc. One mistake could mean a deep puncture, infection, broken bone, or a wound that turned the hunter into scavenged meat days later. This defensive world was not static. Predators changed, and prey changed with them. Large theropods became bigger or more specialized in different places. Herbivores experimented with armor, speed, size, herding, horns, plates, spikes, and tail clubs. The arms race was not a straight ladder upward. Evolution does not climb toward perfection. It tests solutions in local conditions, keeps what works long enough, and abandons what fails when climates, plants, competitors, or predators shift.
By the end of the Jurassic, the basic grammar of dinosaur predator and prey life had become familiar across many ecosystems. Large herbivores fed in groups or loose gatherings. Smaller herbivores used speed, numbers, or cover. Theropods ranged from small hunters to apex predators. Scavenging and predation overlapped. Rivers buried evidence. Tracks formed on wet surfaces. Eggs were laid in nests that could be found by animals much smaller than the adults guarding them. A nest is a battlefield before any predator arrives. It is a place where future life is concentrated in fragile shells. An eggshell fragment tells us almost nothing by itself, but a nesting ground tells us that dinosaurs returned to certain places, arranged eggs, covered or exposed them depending on species, and sometimes remained near them. For a predator, a nest was food with less danger than attacking an adult. For a parent, if parental care was present, the nest was a vulnerable center of attention. Not all dinosaurs cared for young in the same way, and not every nest belonged to an animal that guarded it. Some may have buried eggs and left. Others likely remained close.
Fossil nesting sites show repeated use, eggs arranged in patterns, embryos preserved in shell, and sometimes adults near nests. The evidence varies, but the message is clear enough. Survival began before hatching, and many threats arrived before the first breath. Small predators would have mattered enormously here. A giant theropod is dramatic, but it is not the only danger. Lizards, mammals, small dinosaurs, crocodilian relatives, insects, and other animals could have eaten eggs or hatchlings. Many battles in the Mesozoic were not between famous giants. They were quiet raids at ground level, in cover, at night, or during storms, when a nest was exposed and the adult was away. The fossil record favors large bones. It favors animals that died in places where burial happened quickly.
This means the small battles are often missing. A hatchling carried off leaves almost nothing. An egg opened by a small mammal may leave fragments that are hard to interpret. A juvenile killed in vegetation may disappear completely. The Mesozoic we see is already filtered, biased towards stone, size, and chance. Keeping that bias in mind makes the famous fossils even more valuable. They are not famous only because they are dramatic. They are famous because behavior is hard to fossilize. A skeleton tells us anatomy. A behavior requires position, context, marks, association, or traces. When a fossil captures interaction, it briefly narrows the distance between body and life. In the early Cretaceous of China, volcanic landscapes sometimes preserved animals with remarkable completeness. The J-hole biota includes feathered dinosaurs, early birds, mammals, insects, plants, fish, amphibians, and other organisms from ecosystems shaped by lakes, forests, ash, and sudden burial. These deposits have changed how scientists understand small-bodied Mesozoic life because they preserve animals that many other settings would destroy. One extraordinary fossil from the Luyatun member of the Yixian Formation preserves a mammal, Rhipinomammus robustus, entangled with a young Psittacosaurus. The mammal is positioned as the aggressor, its body on the dinosaur, its jaws near the ribs, its limbs gripping. The researchers who described it argued that the scene most likely records a predation attempt interrupted by sudden volcanic debris. For once, the old idea that Mesozoic mammals only hid beneath dinosaur shadows becomes too simple.
That does not mean mammals ruled those ecosystems. It means interaction was more complicated. Dinosaurs ate mammals. Mammals ate small dinosaurs, eggs, and perhaps at times larger young dinosaurs. Predators were not always bigger than prey. Desperation, surprise, technique, and circumstance all mattered. A modern wolverine can threaten animals larger than itself under the right conditions. The Cretaceous was not required to be less surprising. The Rhipinomammus and Psittacosaurus fossil is still one specimen, and one specimen should not be stretched into a universal rule. But it is a powerful correction. It shows that battlefields can be intimate, low to the ground, and unexpected. A mammal weighing only a few kilograms could be part of the danger surrounding a small dinosaur. Survival was not simply a matter of avoiding the largest jaws in the landscape. Psittacosaurus itself was a small ceratopsian, an early relative of later horned dinosaurs, with a parrot-like beak and a body that moved through Cretaceous forests and open areas in large numbers. Some specimens preserve bristle-like structures along the tail. Some preserve skin and coloration patterns that suggest countershading, a darker upper body and lighter underside, useful for camouflage. Even this modest dinosaur carried evidence of a world where being seen could be dangerous. Camouflage is a quiet defense. It leaves no spectacular weapon in a museum hall. It does not puncture a predator's vertebra or rise as a horn from a skull. But for a small animal, not being noticed can be better than fighting. A pattern on skin, a posture in shade, a body held low among ferns, a pause at the forest edge before crossing open ground. These things do not fossilize easily, but sometimes pigmentation and soft tissue give us glimpses. Predators had their own sensory worlds.
A theropod did not experience a floodplain as a museum diagram. It smelled water, decay, dung, blood, and plants. It saw movement. It heard feet in mud, calls from other animals, insects, wind through conifers, the splash of something entering shallow water. The skulls and inner ears of dinosaurs can reveal parts of this world: vision, balance, hearing, smell, and the spaces where the brain processed signals. Among the most studied predator-prey questions is the relationship between Deinonychus and Tenontosaurus in the early Cretaceous of North America. Deinonychus was a dromaeosaurid, a sickle-clawed theropod with grasping hands, a stiffened tail, and teeth capable of damaging bone. Tenontosaurus was a larger herbivorous ornithopod, not heavily armored, but strong, muscular, and far from helpless. Fossils of Deinonychus teeth associated with Tenontosaurus remains have invited interpretations of predation, group feeding, or scavenging. The popular image is a pack of Deinonychus attacking a Tenontosaurus with coordinated intelligence. The evidence is more cautious. Shed teeth can show feeding. Multiple predator individuals near a carcass can suggest social behavior, or simply several animals drawn to the same meal. Living reptiles and birds provide analogies, but no modern animal is a perfect model for an extinct dromaeosaur. Paleontology has to hold possibility and uncertainty together. Even without proving pack hunting, the scene is dangerous. Tenontosaurus had size, strength, and a heavy tail. Deinonychus had teeth, claws, agility, and perhaps the ability to latch onto prey with its feet and forelimbs. A struggle between them would not have been clean or efficient. It would have been costly. Predators could be kicked, bitten, crushed, or thrown. Prey could be wounded and escape, only to die days later from infection or blood loss. Healed injuries are the fossils of survival. They tell us that an animal lived after the moment that marked it. A bite that healed records not just attack, but escape. A broken rib that knitted back together records pain endured long enough for bone to repair. A damaged tail vertebra with new growth around the wound records time passing after violence. These fossils are quieter than skeletons locked in combat, but in some ways, they are more moving. They prove continuation. To survive a predator is not to defeat predation. It is to carry the encounter forward in the body. The scar becomes part of the animal's movement, feeding, display, and future risk. A limping herbivore may become easier prey later. A wounded predator may become more desperate, more likely to scavenge, more likely to lose territory. A healed bone is a line between one danger and the next. By the late Cretaceous, dinosaur battlefields had changed again. Continents were more separated. Sea levels were high in many intervals. Flowering plants had spread, altering forests, floodplains, and insect communities. Dinosaur faunas became more regional. In western North America, the western interior seaway divided the continent, and along its coastal plains, some of the most famous predator-prey ecosystems in the fossil record developed. Here lived tyrannosaurs, hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, ankylosaurs, pachycephalosaurs, smaller theropods, crocodilians, turtles, mammals, birds, pterosaurs, fish, insects, and plants that looked closer to modern vegetation than Jurassic forests had. The world was still not ours. There was no human sound, no grassland like the later Great Plains in the familiar sense for much of this time. No horses, no bison, no wolves. But some plants flowered, leaves broadened, rivers carried logs, bones, pollen,
and ash. Tyrannosaurus rex appears near the end of this long story, but it did not appear in isolation. It was the final North American expression of a tyrannosaur lineage that had spent tens of millions of years evolving larger bodies, deeper skulls, stronger bites, and sensory systems suited to tracking prey. Its teeth were thick, serrated, and built not merely to slice flesh, but to crush through bone. Its skull was a machine for force.
The old debate over whether Tyrannosaurus was a predator or scavenger was always too narrow. Large carnivores today do both. Lions scavenge, hyenas hunt. Bears steal kills and make their own. Crocodiles ambush living prey and feed on carcasses. A tyrannosaur with powerful senses and a bone-crushing bite would not ignore fresh meat simply because it had not killed it, nor would it refuse vulnerable living prey if opportunity opened. Direct evidence of tyrannosaur predation is rare because behavior is rare in the fossil record, but it exists. A tooth crown embedded in a hadrosaur tail vertebra surrounded by healed bone growth shows that the animal was bitten by a tyrannosaur and survived long enough for healing to occur. That is more than scavenging. A dead animal does not heal. The bite happened in life, and the prey escaped. Think of that hadrosaur after the attack. It survived, but not unchanged. The tail carried a wound from one of the most powerful predators ever to walk on land. Perhaps the animal limped. Perhaps it kept with the herd. Perhaps infection threatened it, then faded. Perhaps the scar became invisible beneath healed tissue. The fossil does not give us the ending. It gives us enough to know there was more life after the bite. Ceratopsians met tyrannosaurs in a different way. Their skulls were massive, with beaks, horns, and frills. Triceratops, Torosaurus, and their relatives were not passive prey. Bite marks on ceratopsian bones show that tyrannosaurs fed on them, and some injuries may record combat or feeding after death. A triceratops facing a tyrannosaur would have presented a dangerous front. Horns forward, head low, body braced, the neck protected by muscle and frill. It is tempting to imagine every meeting between Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops as a duel. The reality was probably more varied. Tyrannosaurs may have attacked juveniles more often than adults. They may have scavenged carcasses. They may have tested wounded individuals. Adult ceratopsians may have deterred many attacks simply by being too risky. The fossil record gives us feeding traces and injuries, but not every decision made in the heat of life. Hadrosaurs chose another path. Many had no horns, no plates, no tail clubs, and no enormous size advantage against a tyrannosaur. Their strength lay in numbers, growth, senses, social structure, and the ability to move across floodplains in herds or gatherings. Their jaws and teeth formed complex batteries for processing vegetation. Their bodies were powerful. Some could shift between four-legged and two-legged movement, depending on speed and need. A hadrosaur herd near a river would have been a living soundscape. Feet pressing into mud, air moving through nasal passages and crests, young animals calling, adults feeding, lifting heads, turning together when something changed at the forest edge. A predator did not need to frighten the whole herd forever. It needed one mistake, one separated juvenile, one injured adult, one animal slowed by mud or confusion. The battlefield here is a margin. Forest to open ground, riverbank to channel, nesting site to surrounding cover, dry season to rain. Life gathers at edges, and edges create risk. Many fossils form at edges too, because water buries, transports, exposes, and preserves. This is why so much dinosaur survival comes back to sediment. The same mud that trapped a footprint could trap a body. At the end of a field season, a paleontologist may brush dust from a surface and find a mark no wider than a finger.
a serration scratch, a tooth groove, a small puncture. There is nothing cinematic about the work in that moment.
It is slow, careful, technical, often uncomfortable. But inside that mark is an ancient contact between animals separated from us by tens or hundreds of millions of years. A mark like that asks for restraint. It asks us not to overstate, but also not to miss its force. A bite mark is not just damage. It is the place where two lives crossed. A trackway is not just an indentation. It is movement. A bone bed is not just abundance. It is a record of deaths, landscapes, and processes that brought remains together. The Mesozoic survives in these small negotiations between evidence and imagination. Dinosaur battlefields are therefore not one type of place. They include the dramatic fossil of Velociraptor and Protoceratops in Mongolia. They include the predator-heavy deposits of Cleveland Lloyd. They include trackways at Glenrose and other sites where moving animals pressed their presence into mud. They include healed tyrannosaur bites, Stegosaurus spike wounds, shed dromaeosaur teeth, nesting grounds, drought assemblages, and volcanic burials from China. Each one carries a different kind of evidence. Body fossils show anatomy and sometimes trauma. Trace fossils show behavior. Sediment shows environment. Geochemistry can reveal age, climate, water conditions, or volcanic influence. Microscopes can distinguish healing from post-burial damage. CT scans can reveal embedded teeth or internal bone response. No single method resurrects the scene alone. The scene emerges when many quiet lines of evidence begin pointing in the same direction. What makes these places powerful is not that they turn dinosaurs into monsters. It is that they turn them back into animals. Animals that made choices with incomplete information. Animals that misjudged distance. Animals that defended nests. Animals that followed herds. Animals that scavenged when hungry. Animals that survived attacks and carried wounds. Animals that died in ordinary places, made extraordinary by preservation. The more closely we look, the less simple the Mesozoic becomes. Predator and prey were not fixed roles carved into stone. A young tyrannosaur could be prey. A mammal could attack a dinosaur. A herbivore could injure a predator. A carcass could feed many species. A nest could attract small thieves while giant animals moved nearby without noticing. The dinosaur age was not one hierarchy. It was a web. The Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous each wrote that web differently. Different plants fed different herbivores. Different herbivores supported different predators. Different climates shaped where animals gathered. Different sediments determined what we can still see. To follow predator, prey, and survival across the Mesozoic is to move through changing worlds, not through one timeless arena. So we begin again with the wound in the bone. It is small compared with the animal that carried it, smaller still compared with the age that buried it. But it opens a door. Through it, we enter a world of floodplains, forests, dunes, shorelines, nests, trackways, ash layers, and riverbeds. A world where every animal lived between hunger and danger. A world where survival was not guaranteed by size, teeth, armor, speed, or numbers, but negotiated every day until the negotiation failed. To understand the first long arc of these battlefields, the Triassic cannot be skipped. The world after the Permian extinction was not a gentle recovery. It was a hard experiment in heat, drought, oxygen stress, shifting coastlines, and open ecological space. Life returned, but it returned into a planet still unsettled. Archosaurs diversified.
Some lines led toward crocodilians. One line led toward pterosaurs. Another led toward dinosaurs. None of them knew they were founding dynasties. The earliest dinosaurs were not the largest animals in their ecosystems. Many were lightly built, bipedal, and relatively small. They had upright limbs beneath the body, efficient movement, and perhaps growth rates that gave them advantages in certain settings. But they lived among other animals that were already powerful. The land belonged as much to crocodile-line archosaurs as to dinosaur-line archosaurs. Predation was shared among several experiments.
Picture a late Triassic river flat. Not yet a Jurassic floodplain crowded with giant sauropods, but a warmer, sparser world where seasonal rains matter deeply. Mud cracks at the edges of shrinking pools. Horsetails cluster near water. Conifers and seed ferns rise in patches away from the channel. A small dinosaur crosses quickly, head low, tail extended for balance. Its footprints are narrow and three-toed. Nearby, a larger archosaur has left deeper marks. We should not imagine this world as a rehearsal for dinosaurs. To the animals living there, it was complete. The predators were not waiting to be replaced. The herbivores were not transitional props. They were successful creatures in their own time. Extinction changed the balance later, but before that change, early dinosaurs survived within a broader archosaur world, sometimes hunting, sometimes hiding, sometimes feeding at the edges of systems dominated by others. When the Triassic-Jurassic extinction came, it did not arrive as a single claw from the sky. It unfolded through environmental crisis. Massive volcanism associated with the opening of the Central Atlantic released gases into the atmosphere, altered climate, and stressed ecosystems on land and in the sea. Many lineages vanished. Others crossed the boundary. Dinosaurs were among the survivors, and survival became opportunity. This is one of the great reversals in the history of life. The dinosaurs that entered the Jurassic were not rewarded for virtue, intelligence, or some destiny built into their bones. They survived a particular crisis with traits that happened to work in that particular world. Afterward, empty ecological roles opened around them. Predators disappeared, herbivores disappeared, competitors disappeared. The survivors expanded into space left behind by death. Every later battlefield stands on that extinction. Without it, the Jurassic would not have looked the same. The giant sauropod herds, the allosaur-dominated floodplains, the armored herbivores, the early birds, the famous dinosaur communities of the Morrison and beyond, all belong to a world remade after catastrophe. The battle between predator and prey is never separate from climate, geology, and extinction. Bodies fight within environments, and environments decide what kinds of bodies can persist. A Jurassic footprint in ancient mud is therefore more than an animal passing by. It is a survivor's descendant touching a changed planet. The toes press down into wet sediment beside plants that survived or replaced earlier communities. The foot lifts. Mud slumps. A film of water fills the impression. If burial comes quickly enough, the print becomes a trace of life after collapse. In the early Jurassic, predator-prey relationships were still reorganizing. Theropods became increasingly important as land predators. Sauropodomorph herbivores grew larger and more specialized. Ornithischian dinosaurs, including early armored forms and small bipedal herbivores, diversified quietly. The ecosystems were not yet the classic late Jurassic scenes of enormous sauropods under allosaur pressure, but the foundations were there. Dilophosaurus gives one image of that transition. It lived in the early Jurassic of what is now North America, with paired crests rising from the skull and a body larger than many Triassic theropods. Popular culture turned it into something it was not, but the real animal is more interesting than the invention.
It was a large predator in a recovering world, lightly built compared with later giants, but capable, alert, and dangerous to many animals around it. Its crests were probably not weapons. They were too delicate for that. Display is more likely. Recognition, maturity, species signaling, perhaps social behavior. This matters because predators are not just mouths. They are animals with bodies shaped by reproduction, communication, growth, and competition with their own kind. A predator must find food, but it must also find mates, avoid injury, and navigate the presence of rivals. A crested theropod moving through a river valley would not have looked like a simple killing machine.
It would have paused, turned its head, watched movement in the vegetation, stepped over driftwood, scented carcasses, and perhaps avoided larger threats. It might have hunted smaller dinosaurs, early sauropodomorph juveniles, synapsids, reptiles, and whatever else its jaws could manage. The battlefield was daily life, not a staged encounter. As the Jurassic continued, sauropods altered the scale of prey. Their bodies became so large that predation itself had to adapt. A predator that could kill small animals easily could not simply use the same approach on a multi-ton herbivore. The difference between biting a small ornithischian and attacking a sauropod is not only size. It is risk, leverage, access, and the problem of bringing down an animal whose body is too massive to topple casually. A sauropod herd would have changed the ground around it. Feet pressed deep into soft sediment. Vegetation disappeared along feeding routes. Trails formed through forests and open floodplains. Dung returned plant matter to the system. Young trees were stripped or broken. Riverbanks collapsed under weight. The animals were not scenery within the ecosystem. They were forces inside it. Predators living with sauropods had to exploit vulnerability. Eggs, hatchlings, juveniles, sick adults, animals mired in mud, carcasses opened by heat or scavengers. A large theropod did not need to kill an adult sauropod often to live in a sauropod world. It needed access to flesh, and flesh could come from many circumstances. Hunting and scavenging were not opposites. They were connected strategies. This is one reason the idea of dinosaur battles should be handled carefully. The most dramatic image is the least common event: a predator trying to pull down a healthy adult giant. More common and more important were the moments that did not make heroic scenes. A juvenile separated near a channel, An old animal unable to keep pace. A carcass found after drought.
a nest discovered. A wounded animal followed until it weakened. Allosaurus fits into this practical world. Its skull, teeth, neck, arms, and legs made it one of the dominant predators of late Jurassic North America. Many specimens preserve variation in size and growth, suggesting animals of different ages living within the same landscapes. Juvenile allosaurs would not have fed exactly like adults. They were smaller, perhaps faster, and likely took different prey. A dinosaur species could contain several ecological roles across its life. Ontogeny matters. A hatchling, or juvenile predator, may hunt insects, lizards, mammals, or small dinosaurs. As it grows, its jaw strength, stride, territory, prey choice, and risk tolerance change. A full-grown Allosaurus could approach carcasses and animals that a juvenile could not safely handle. In this way, a single predator species could pressure multiple levels of the ecosystem at different ages. A shed tooth in the mud can tell part of that story. Theropods replaced teeth throughout life. Teeth were lost while feeding, fighting, or biting hard material. A tooth found beside herbivore bones may be a clue to feeding, but the tooth alone does not say whether the prey was alive when the bite happened. The tooth is evidence of contact. The context decides how far the interpretation can go. At a carcass, the scene would not be orderly. Large predators might arrive first or last. Smaller scavengers could feed between visits.
Insects would work constantly. Crocodilian relatives might drag parts toward water. Bones could be cracked, trampled, scattered, or buried. A single sauropod body could support a temporary community of feeders, each leaving a different signature if preservation allowed it. Imagine a dead Camarasaurus on a Morrison floodplain. The body lies partly on its side, ribs lifted, neck curved toward the mud. The smell spreads through warm air. An Allosaurus approaches and feeds at the flank, slicing soft tissue. Later, another predator pulls at the tail. Small theropods pick at exposed areas. Beetles and flies move in. Rain falls. The river rises. By the time sediment covers the bones, the animal has become a place. Paleontologists examining such remains look for patterns. Tooth mark spacing can indicate the size or type of predator. Serration marks can preserve the shape of teeth. Breakage patterns can distinguish weathering, trampling, transport, and feeding damage. Bone healing can separate injuries from events after death. The work is detailed because the questions are difficult. Ancient violence does not announce itself. It has to be diagnosed. In some cases, the absence of evidence matters too. A carcass with little scavenging may have been buried quickly. A skeleton with articulated limbs may have moved little after death. Scattered bones may suggest transport, trampling, or prolonged exposure. A bone bed with many individuals of similar age may signal drought, flood, disease, or social behavior. Every answer depends on what else is present and what is missing. The Cleveland Lloyd deposit is powerful because it refuses a simple story. More than one explanation has been proposed for its high predator content. That uncertainty does not weaken the site. It makes it more honest. A real ancient landscape was rarely governed by one clean cause. Mud, drought, carcasses, water chemistry, repeated animal visits, and burial could all contribute to the final pattern. The quarry is a battlefield precisely because it preserves not a duel, but a dangerous system. A visitor standing before bones in a quarry wall sees stillness. The animals no longer breathe, and the rock has no movement except in the imagination. But the arrangement of bones is the residue of motion. Animals arrived, water moved, flesh decayed, sediment settled. Later, uplift and erosion brought the deposit back into daylight. The stillness is recent. The motion came first. Not all predator-prey evidence involves bite marks. Coprolites, fossilized dung, can contain bone fragments, plant matter, scales, or other remains. Stomach contents can preserve a last meal. Wear on teeth can suggest feeding style. Limb proportions can suggest running, grasping, or weight-bearing habits. Trackways can show pursuit, group movement, or simply repeated use of the same surface. Survival is reconstructed through many kinds of traces. Speed is one area where caution is especially important. Dinosaur tracks can sometimes provide estimates based on stride length, hip height, and gait, but they do not usually capture maximum speed. A trackway shows how fast an animal moved at that moment. A skeleton shows possible mechanics, not a stopwatch. The fastest run of an extinct animal is almost never preserved. What survives is a sample of behavior, not the limit of performance. Still, even ordinary walking can be revealing. A herd moving at a steady pace may suggest calm travel rather than panic. Parallel trackways can suggest multiple animals crossing together. A sudden change in direction might indicate avoidance, slipping, obstacle negotiation, or interaction. Deep prints may record soft ground, heavy weight, or both. A dragging tail would be visible if present, and in most dinosaur trackways it is absent, confirming tails held above the ground.
the track maker is often unknown at species level. A footprint does not usually carry a name. It carries anatomy, number of toes, pad shapes, claw marks, width, depth, stride. Scientists classify tracks into ichnotaxa, names for trace fossils rather than the animals themselves. This can feel frustrating, but it is also a reminder that behavior and body are not preserved in the same way. A footprint is its own fossil category. There is something intimate about that.
A skeleton may be assembled from bones found apart, prepared, mounted, and labeled.
A footprint remains a single gesture. The animal stepped there. Its weight met a surface. For a moment, the ground accepted the shape of its foot. Then the animal left. Everything else is time. In late Jurassic ecosystems, prey animals did more than flee. Stegosaurus used tail spikes. Sauropods used size and perhaps group living. Small ornithopods used agility and alertness. Early ankylosaur relatives began experimenting with armor. Each strategy came with costs. Armor is heavy. Size requires food and long growth. Speed limits body shape. Herding creates competition for local vegetation and can attract predators. No defense is free. This is why prey animals are often more interesting than the predators pursuing them. Predators display the obvious tools of conflict: teeth, claws, jaws, eyes facing forward.
Prey display the deeper complexity. They must feed while watching, grow while exposed, reproduce in places that can be found, carry defenses that do not prevent all attacks, only enough attacks. Their bodies record a balance between getting food and not becoming food. Sauropods stretched that balance to an extreme. Their necks let them feed across broad vertical and horizontal ranges without moving the whole body as often. Their bodies held vast digestive systems. Their small heads cropped vegetation efficiently. Their air-filled bones reduced skeletal weight. Their long growth brought them toward a size class beyond most predators. But before adulthood, every one of those giants had been small enough to kill. This creates a grim arithmetic. A sauropod species could lay many eggs and lose many young. Predators might take hatchlings and juveniles year after year, while only a small percentage reached enormous size. To us, the adult is the icon. To the ecosystem, the vulnerable young may have been the steady food source. The survival of the species did not require every young animal to live. It required enough. That pattern appears in many living animals. Sea turtles lay many eggs because most hatchlings die. Crocodilians guard nests in some species, but young still face danger from birds, fish, mammals, and other reptiles. Large mammals protect calves in groups, but predators still take the weak. Dinosaurs would have varied widely, but the principle is familiar. Reproduction is part of the predator-prey system. We should avoid forcing modern analogies too far. Dinosaurs were not elephants with scales, crocodiles on stilts, or birds simply enlarged. They had their own metabolisms, growth patterns, social behaviors, and sensory worlds. But modern ecosystems can help frame questions. They show that predators scavenge, prey injure predators, young animals face different dangers than adults, and many dramatic confrontations are avoided rather than fought. Avoidance rarely fossilizes. A triceratops that deterred a tyrannosaur by facing it leaves no mark. A herd that moved away before an attack leaves only tracks, if even those survive. A predator that chose not to risk injury disappears from the evidence. The fossil record overrepresents contact because contact can damage bone. It underrepresents all the moments when danger passed without collision. This means the Mesozoic was probably less visibly violent than our fossil examples suggest, and more constantly tense. The animals were not always fighting. They were feeding, walking, resting, nesting, growing, competing, courting, migrating, and wading through weather. Danger was woven into those activities, rather than replacing them. When the Cretaceous began, the world inherited these Jurassic systems and then changed them. Flowering plants spread gradually and unevenly. New insect relationships developed. Herbivore communities shifted. Some Jurassic lineages declined while others rose. Dromaeosaurs, early tyrannosauroids, ornithopods, ceratopsians, ankylosaurs, titanosaurs, and many other groups diversified in different regions. Predator and prey relationships became more varied and more regional. In early Cretaceous North America, Tenontosaurus moved through floodplains where Deinonychus lived. The herbivore was larger, with a long tail and a strong body, probably capable of forceful defense. Deinonychus was smaller, but armed with grasping limbs, serrated teeth, and the famous enlarged claw on the second toe. The association between their fossils has shaped generations of dinosaur imagery, but the real evidence asks for nuance. Shed Deinonychus teeth found with Tenontosaurus remains show that dromaeosaurs fed on Tenontosaurus. Bite marks and tooth damage support physical interaction with bone. The question is whether these cases represent active group hunting, scavenging, opportunistic feeding, repeated attraction to carcasses, or several of these at different times. Fossils can preserve the meal without preserving the hunt. Pack hunting is difficult to prove even in extinct mammals, and harder still in dinosaurs. Coordinated behavior leaves little direct trace. Multiple individuals at a site may indicate sociality, but they may also indicate competition at a carcass. Trackways of similar animals moving in the same direction can suggest group movement, but not necessarily cooperative hunting. Scientists can discuss likelihood. Certainty is rare. Even so, Deinonychus did not need a perfect pack to be dangerous. A single animal could attack smaller prey, raid nests, or feed at carcasses. Several animals drawn to a Tenontosaurus body could create chaos without true cooperation. If they did hunt together sometimes, the risk would still be high. A kick, tail blow, or fall from a struggling herbivore could injure a predator that depended on mobility. Popular reconstructions often make predation look efficient. A predator leaps, a claw strikes, the prey falls. Real predation is often messy. Attacks fail. Prey escape wounded. Predators misjudge. Injuries accumulate. Scavengers wait nearby. The fossil record, with its healed bones and ambiguous associations, may be closer to that messiness than the clean scenes we invent. A Tenontosaurus rib with tooth marks is not a movie frame. It is a remnant of contact. The animal may have been alive, dying, or dead. The predator may have hunted, scavenged, or fed after another animal opened the carcass. But the bone still belongs to an ecology of risk. It shows that the bodies of herbivores were resources, and predators found them. The early Cretaceous of China adds another layer because preservation there can be extraordinary. Fine sediments, volcanic ash, and rapid burial captured feathers, skin outlines, stomach contents, and animals in lifelike positions. Instead of only the largest bones from rivers, these deposits preserve small dinosaurs, mammals, birds, insects, plants, and delicate traces that widen the battlefield beyond giants. Feathered theropods change the visual world of predation. A small dromaeosaur or troodontid moving through a Cretaceous forest was not necessarily bare and reptilian in the old sense. Feathers could insulate, display, streamline, cover the body, and in some lineages assist with gliding or flight-related behaviors. A predator could be soft-edged and lethal at the same time. Feathers do not make every small theropod a bird, and they do not make every feathered dinosaur capable of flight. The evolution of feathers began before powered flight and served several functions. In predator-prey terms, feathers may have helped regulate temperature, signal to mates or rivals, camouflage the body,
or assist maneuvering during leaps and turns. Their significance depended on the species carrying them. Imagine a small feathered predator pausing on a fallen branch above a fern-covered floor. Its body is warm. Its eyes track movement below. A mammal slips through leaf litter. A juvenile dinosaur steps from cover. Insects rise from damp wood. The predator does not need to roar. Its world is close, quick, and precise. Many Mesozoic battlefields happened at this scale, beneath the attention of giants. The Lugiatun fossil of Repenomamus and Psittacosaurus is so striking because it reverses the expected direction of danger. The mammal is smaller, but positioned in attack. The dinosaur is not a hatchling just out of the egg, but a young animal large enough to matter. Sudden volcanic burial stopped decay and argument from erasing the contact. It is a violent scene, but also a deeply ecological one. The lesson is not that mammals overthrew dinosaurs early. They did not. Non-avian dinosaurs remained dominant land animals in many ecosystems until the end Cretaceous extinction. The lesson is that dominance did not remove vulnerability. A dinosaur could still be prey to a mammal, at least under certain conditions. The shadow metaphor is incomplete. In the shadows, teeth were also working. Fossils like this remind us that food webs are built from many interactions, not only the largest ones. Eggs fed small animals. Insects fed lizards. Lizards fed small theropods. Small theropods fed larger theropods. Carcasses fed nearly everything. Plants fed herbivores, but herbivores also shaped plants by browsing, trampling, dispersing seeds, and returning nutrients. A battlefield is sometimes just a food web made visible. By the Middle and later Cretaceous, some prey lineages became heavily defended. Ankylosaurs carried armor embedded in the skin, with bony plates protecting the back and flanks. Some developed tail clubs, masses of bone at the end of muscular tails that could deliver serious blows. Nodosaurids lacked tail clubs, but often had shoulder spikes and extensive armor. These were not fast animals built to outrun danger. They were animals built to make attack expensive. An ankylosaur trackway would not have the lightness of a small theropod. The animal's body was low, broad, and heavy. Its feet pressed with the confidence of a living shield. A predator, encountering a mature ankylosaur, faced a problem of access. The back was armored. The head was protected. The body was close to the ground. The belly, softer and more vulnerable, was not easy to reach. A tail club, where present, changed the space behind the animal. Like the spikes of Stegosaurus, it turned the rear into a danger zone. A blow to a predator's leg could break bone or damage muscle. For an animal that needed to walk, run, hunt, and compete, that risk mattered. The best defense is not always killing the attacker. Sometimes it is making the attacker choose something else. Armor also had other possible roles. It may have helped in species recognition, display, or competition within the species. Some armor patterns differ among individuals and taxa. Again, biology resists single-purpose explanations, but in predator-prey terms, the defensive value is hard to ignore. A bite that cannot reach flesh is a failed bite, and enough failed bites can reshape predator behavior. Ceratopsians took another path. Early forms like Psittacosaurus were small and beaked, without the huge horns of later relatives. Over time, especially in late Cretaceous North America and Asia, ceratopsians evolved large skulls, frills, brow horns, nasal horns, and powerful bodies. Their heads became some of the most impressive structures ever carried by land animals, but the reasons were multiple: display, species recognition, sexual selection, muscle attachment, and defense all likely played roles in different ways. A herd or aggregation of ceratopsians on a coastal plain would have been visually overwhelming. Heavy bodies, parrot-like beaks cropping vegetation, frills rising like shields and signals, horns catching light, young animals staying among adults.
A tyrannosaur approaching such a group would not see isolated targets first. It would see a moving wall of heads. But a wall is only strong if the weak remain inside it. A juvenile at the edge, an old individual lagging, a sick animal lying near water, a carcass exposed after flood recession, these were openings. Predators do not need to defeat the whole herd. They need to find the crack in its protection. This was the shape of survival across the Mesozoic. Not perfect defense, not perfect attack, but continuous pressure. Teeth selected for caution. Armor selected for stronger jaws. Herding selected for ambush. Ambush selected for vigilance. Nests selected for raiders, and raiders selected for guarding or concealment. The battlefield extended across generations until it became anatomy. In the Gobi Desert, the sand remembers a different kind of contact. The famous fighting dinosaurs fossil preserves Velociraptor and Protoceratops entangled in a way that few fossils ever do. The Velociraptor's limb is caught near the jaws of the Protoceratops. The predator's sickle claw is placed against the herbivore's neck region. The bodies are not scattered. They are locked in a physical relationship that feels uncomfortably immediate. These animals lived during the late Cretaceous in what is now Mongolia, in deposits associated with ancient dune fields and dry environments. Protoceratops was a stocky ceratopsian without the enormous horns of Triceratops, but it was much heavier than Velociraptor. Velociraptor was a real dromaeosaur, feathered, agile, and dangerous, but far smaller than its popular image. Their fossil association is dramatic because both the predator and prey are preserved together in the same fatal moment. The scene is often described as a fight, and that is reasonable. But the motive remains uncertain. Velociraptor may have attacked Protoceratops as prey. The two may have clashed over a carcass, territory, nest, or some other resource. One animal may have surprised the other. A sand collapse or storm may have buried them before either could escape. The fossil captures contact, not intention. Still, contact is enough. In most cases, predator-prey interactions are inferred from separated evidence: a tooth here, a bone there, a track nearby. Here the bodies are together, and their limbs speak in the direct grammar of struggle. The prey animal did not simply fall. The predator did not simply feed. Both animals were engaged, and both died before the scene could come apart. Fossils like this are rare because behavior usually decays faster than bone. After death, bodies relax, rot, collapse, float, scatter, and are disturbed by other animals. Joints separate, ligaments fail, skin opens, sediment moves. To preserve two animals locked together, burial must happen quickly and in the right conditions. The window is narrow. Most of life disappears through it. This rarity should make us cautious about drawing broad conclusions from one specimen. It should also make us grateful. The fighting dinosaurs fossil is not valuable because it confirms a simple story of predator versus prey. It is valuable because it shows that the Mesozoic sometimes preserved moments so specific they feel almost impossible. One animal's claw, another animal's jaws. The two caught at the edge between action and burial. Stand before that fossil in your mind, and the drama becomes quieter. The bones are not moving now. Their violence has been reduced to position. The sand that ended them is gone or transformed into rock. The heat, breath, dust, and muscle are missing. What remains is a question held in red stone. Mongolia's late Cretaceous environments were not only places of combat, they were nesting grounds, dune fields, scrublands, and habitats for many dinosaurs and other animals. Protoceratops was abundant in some deposits, suggesting that it formed a major part of local herbivore communities. Oviraptorosaurs, dromaeosaurs, ankylosaurs, small mammals, lizards, and other reptiles shared the landscape. A predator like Velociraptor lived within a web of possible meals and dangers. The image of Velociraptor attacking only Protoceratops is too narrow. It may have eaten lizards, mammals, small dinosaurs, eggs, hatchlings, carrion, and perhaps occasionally larger prey. Its curved foot claws may have helped grip prey, pin struggling animals, or maintain traction during attacks. Its arms and hands could grasp. Its feathers may have insulated and displayed. It was not just a claw with a body attached. The killing use of dromaeosaur sickle claws has been debated. Earlier images often showed them slashing open prey. More recent work has emphasized gripping, pinning, or puncturing roles, sometimes compared loosely with how modern raptors use their talons. No living bird is a perfect equivalent. The claw's shape, the foot's mechanics, and the rest of the body all matter. The safest statement is that these claws were predatory tools, but exactly how they were used likely varied by animal size and prey. Protoceratops, for its part, was not helpless. Its beak could bite. Its body was compact and muscular. Its skull and frill made its head look larger and more difficult to handle. Against a smaller predator, even a shove, bite, or twist could be dangerous. The famous fossil shows the velociraptor's arm caught in the Protoceratops' mouth, a reminder that prey can make predators pay. This is one of the central lessons of dinosaur battlefields. Predation is not domination without cost. The hunted animal is trying to live. It kicks, turns, bites, lowers its head, runs, hides, groups with others, swings a tail, lashes with spikes, or simply refuses to fall. Every predator approaches a living problem, not a passive object. Far away from Mongolia, a different kind of battlefield lies in track-bearing stone. Footprints preserve tension without skeletons. A theropod track might approach a herd trail. A smaller animal might cross between larger prints. A mud surface might record several species moving through the same corridor. Nothing dies in the track itself, but danger can still be felt in the spacing. Trackways are among the strongest evidence for group movement in dinosaurs. When multiple parallel trails occur on the same surface, with similar direction and spacing, they can suggest animals traveling together. Some sauropod track sites show several individuals moving in ways consistent with herding. Other sites preserve theropod trackways that may represent animals moving in loose groups. Though movement together is not the same as coordinated hunting, fossil footprints are not perfect. A track can be distorted by wet sediment, overprinted by later animals, eroded before burial, or exposed unevenly millions of years later. A deep footprint may look larger than the foot. A soft substrate can blur claw marks. Undertracks, formed in sediment layers below the original surface, can preserve distorted versions of the real print. Reading trackways requires as much caution as reading bones. But when the preservation is good, tracks reveal details bones cannot. They show a foot in use. They show whether toes spread in mud. They show stride length, pace, direction, and sometimes behavior across a surface. They can reveal limps, slips, swimming traces, turning, and interactions with the ground. A skeleton is the possibility of movement. A trackway is movement preserved. At Glen Rose, the Paluxy River tracks became famous because they seemed to bring large dinosaurs into motion. The slabs show sauropod and theropod footprints from the early Cretaceous. For a long time, some reconstructions imagined a predator following a giant herbivore. Whether or not that exact chase occurred, the tracks still place predator and prey in the same coastal world, using the same wet ground near an ancient sea. A shoreline is a natural battlefield. Water draws animals together. Mud records their passage. Vegetation grows thick in places, offering cover for ambush and food for herbivores. Channels create bottlenecks. Soft ground can slow escape. The edge between land and water is rich, but richness creates risk. The animals came because they needed what the place offered. The track does not preserve the animal's fear, it preserves pressure. Yet pressure is enough to imagine weight, pace, and direction. A sauropod foot sinks, rounded and immense. A theropod foot lands beside it later, toes narrow, claws pointed. A smaller animal crosses between them. Sun dries the surface. Another tide or flood covers it. the moment becomes stone. Trackways also remind us that many dinosaur interactions were spatial rather than physical. Predators and prey shared trails, water sources, nesting grounds, and migration routes. A predator might patrol the same riverbank for weeks. Herbivores might return to the same crossing season after season. The actual attack may never be preserved, but the repeated use of the same place can be preserved in overlapping traces. In ecology, danger is often a landscape feature. Modern prey animals know where predators are more likely to appear, and they alter feeding, movement, and vigilance accordingly. We cannot map dinosaur fear directly, but we can recognize places where risk was likely concentrated. Waterholes, forest edges, nesting colonies, carcass sites, mud traps, and narrow crossings would have mattered. A dinosaur battlefield, then, is also a geography of choices. Do you feed in the open, where you can see danger coming, or near cover, where food may be better but predators can hide? Do you bring young to the water at midday, when heat is harsh but visibility is good, or at dawn, when light is low? Do you stay with the group and compete for food, or drift to the edge where plants are untouched? No fossil records the question, but bodies record the consequences of such questions over generations. Large herbivore herds would have transformed these choices. A herd is not a peaceful crowd. It is a living structure made of attention, competition, dominance, young animals, adults, injuries, and movement. It can protect and endanger at the same time. A young dinosaur inside the group may be safer from predators, but it can be trampled, pushed away from food, or separated during panic. Panic is rarely preserved directly, but mass death assemblages sometimes hint at sudden events. Herds can die in floods, droughts, volcanic ash, poisoned water, collapsing banks, or traps, when many individuals of the same species occur together. Paleontologists ask whether the animals lived together, died together, or were brought together after death. The answer can reveal behavior, but only if the sediment and bone positions support it. Hadrosaur bone beds, ceratopsian bone beds, and other dinosaur accumulations have been interpreted in some cases as evidence for social behavior or mass mortality. Some deposits contain many individuals of different ages, suggesting groups that included juveniles and adults. Others are dominated by certain age classes. Still others may reflect river transport rather than living herds. The details matter more than the dramatic label. A bone bed is a crowd without voices. Skulls lie near limb bones. Ribs overlap. Teeth sit loose in sediment. Juvenile bones may be fragile, adult bones thick and weathered. The living herd, if there was one, is gone. What remains is a distribution of bodies, and the question of whether those bodies once moved together. Social behavior is not the same in every dinosaur group. Sauropods may have moved in groups, but those groups could vary by age or season. Hadrosaurs may have formed large aggregations in some environments. Ceratopsians may have gathered in numbers, perhaps seasonally or around resources. Theropod sociality is even more difficult, because predators can gather at carcasses without stable cooperation. Fossils can suggest, but rarely complete, the picture. Nesting sites provide another form of social evidence. Some dinosaur nesting grounds show repeated use of the same area and many nests arranged across a landscape. Eggs may be laid in clutches, rings, rows, or clusters, depending on species. Embryos can identify the parent group. Eggshell microstructure can reveal incubation strategies. Sediment around nests can indicate whether eggs were buried or exposed. In a nesting ground, predator and prey relationships compress. Eggs are rich food. Hatchlings are vulnerable. Adults may be distracted by nesting behavior. Small animals can raid with less risk than attacking a full-grown dinosaur. Larger predators may prowl the edges if adults are present. Scavengers may arrive after storms or failed nests. A nesting colony can be a nursery and a feeding ground at once. Imagine a late Cretaceous nesting site after rain. The ground is soft.
Eggshell fragments lie scattered where one nest has hatched or been opened. A small mammal noses through damp vegetation. A lizard slips between low plants. A theropod, the size of a dog, moves carefully along the edge, listening. Farther away, adult dinosaurs call or shift their weight. The violence here is small, but the stakes are the future of a generation. Fossil eggs are quiet objects. They do not show eyes or teeth. They are oval, broken, textured, often incomplete. But they carry the beginning of dinosaur life. In thin section, their shell structure reveals growth, gas exchange, and reproductive biology. In nests, their arrangement reveals behavior. In fragments, they reveal disturbance. An eggshell can be as much a trace of survival as a tooth mark. Some dinosaurs grew quickly. Growth rings in bone, vascular structure, and comparisons across individuals show that many dinosaur species changed dramatically over their lives. Rapid growth could be a survival strategy, especially for prey species. The faster a young animal reached a larger size, the sooner it left the most vulnerable category. But fast growth required food, and food required exposure. This creates another balance. To grow, a juvenile must feed. To feed, it must move, lower its head, leave cover, or compete near others. Every feeding opportunity becomes a risk calculation. A young hadrosaur near a riverbank might need the soft plants there, but the same riverbank may hold crocodilian relatives, small theropods, or the scent trail of a larger predator. Growth is not just biology, it is survival under pressure. Crocodilian line animals remained part of dinosaur battlefields throughout the Mesozoic. Some were small, some were large, some lived in water, others on land. A dinosaur drinking at a river's edge may have faced danger from below as well as from the forest. Bite marks, skeletons, and trackways remind us that non-dinosaur predators shared these systems. The age of dinosaurs was never only dinosaurs. Marine reptiles also had their own predator-prey worlds, but for this title, the center remains land. Still, coastlines mattered. Many dinosaur habitats bordered shallow seas, deltas, lagoons, and floodplains. Storms could move carcasses. Sea level changes could open or close corridors. Coastal sediments preserved tracks and bones. Terrestrial dinosaurs lived under the influence of water even when they never entered the sea. The Cretaceous world of Western North America is a strong example. The Western Interior Seaway split the continent for much of the period, creating coastal plains along its margins. Rivers drained toward the seaway. Floodplains spread across lowlands. Plant communities were productive. Dinosaur faunas evolved in this long, shifting borderland between land and inland sea. Predator and prey lived where sediment was ready to remember them. In the north, formations like Dinosaur Park, Hell Creek, Lance, Judith River, and others preserve late Cretaceous ecosystems with tyrannosaurs. Hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, ankylosaurs, pachycephalosaurs, small theropods, turtles, crocodilians, mammals, fish, and plants. These formations do not all represent the same exact time or place. Together, they show a long pattern of richly populated coastal and river landscapes. The Hell Creek Formation, near the end of the Cretaceous, has become almost symbolic because it brings together Tyrannosaurus, Triceratops, Edmontosaurus, Ankylosaurus, smaller dinosaurs, and the shadow of the asteroid impact that would follow. But before it was a symbol, it was a place. Rivers cut channels. Leaves fell. Animals nested, fed, drank, and died. The end was coming, but the animals did not live as if they were near a boundary. Tyrannosaurus rex was one of the last great non-avian dinosaur predators. Its bite force was extraordinary. Its teeth were thick and deeply rooted. Its skull was built to withstand forces that would have damaged more delicate theropod heads. The animal could crush bone, leaving heavily scored and fragmented remains. In some deposits, tyrannosaur feeding traces are unmistakable. Bone crushing does not mean every bite was a killing bite. Tyrannosaurs fed on carcasses as well as living prey. Bite marks on bones can record feeding after death. Healed bite injuries, however, show attacks that living animals survived. This distinction is central. The same predator can be both hunter and scavenger. The fossil evidence must be read mark by mark. The hadrosaur tail vertebra, with an embedded tyrannosaur tooth crown and healed bone around it, is one of the strongest cases for active predation by Tyrannosaurus. The tooth entered the bone while the animal was alive. The prey escaped, and the bone responded. That single healed wound carries a sequence: attack, penetration, survival, healing. Later death, burial, discovery. It is the survival that makes the fossil so striking. A dead animal can be bitten endlessly and never heal. A living animal can be marked once and carry the trace. Somewhere in the late Cretaceous, a hadrosaur moved away from a tyrannosaur attack with a tooth in its tail. It continued through its world, feeding and moving with the injury inside it. The fossil is not only evidence of violence, it is evidence of endurance. Hadrosaurs are sometimes overshadowed by the predators that hunted them, but they were among the great success stories of the Cretaceous. Their dental batteries processed tough vegetation efficiently. Their bodies could support quadrupedal feeding and bipedal movement. Some had elaborate crests or nasal passages that may have been used in sound, display, or recognition. Their abundance in many deposits suggests they were central prey animals, but also central survivors. A successful prey animal is not one that avoids death completely. That is impossible. It is one whose species persists despite predation. Hadrosaurs did this through growth, reproduction, social behavior, feeding efficiency, and adaptability across changing landscapes. They fed the predators, but they were not defined only by being eaten. Their evolutionary success lasted tens of millions of years. The same is true of ceratopsians. Triceratops is often imagined only in relation to Tyrannosaurus, horn against tooth, skull against skull. But Triceratops also fed, grew, competed, reproduced, and moved through a changing floodplain world. Its horns may have mattered in defense, but also in contests with other Triceratops and in visual display. The body was shaped by more than one pressure. Still, those horns mattered when danger came. A predator approaching the front of an adult Triceratops faced two long brow horns, a shorter nasal horn, a powerful beak, and a heavy body. Attacking from behind or the side may have been safer, but even then, the prey could turn. Large predators often succeed not by overpowering prey at full strength, but by choosing the moment when the prey cannot deploy its defenses effectively. Bite marks on Triceratops bones show tyrannosaurs fed on them. Some marks on frills and horns may reflect combat, feeding, or post-mortem damage, depending on the specimen. The most honest reconstruction allows multiple scenarios. Tyrannosaurs likely scavenged ceratopsian carcasses. They may have attacked juveniles and vulnerable adults. Ceratopsians likely defended themselves when forced. No single image covers all encounters. Ankylosaurus, living in the same general late Cretaceous world, presents another extreme. Its armor was not a thin decorative shell. It was a system of bony plates and knobs embedded in skin, protecting a broad, low body. Its tail club, in mature individuals, could have delivered powerful lateral blows. A tyrannosaur might have been able to kill an ankylosaur under the right circumstances, but the cost of a mistake could be severe. A broken ankle, damaged foot, or shattered lower leg could end a large predator's life slowly. It might still breathe. It might still see prey. But without reliable movement, hunting becomes harder, scavenging more desperate, rivals more dangerous. Predators did not need to die immediately from defensive wounds. They only needed to be weakened enough for the ecosystem to finish them. This is why prey defenses influence predator behavior even when they are never used. The possibility of injury shapes decisions. A predator may avoid healthy adults, focus on juveniles, approach from certain angles, hunt during low visibility, or wait near water. The anatomy of prey becomes a map of risk in the predator's mind. None of this is preserved in thought.
It is preserved in patterns. Juvenile bones with tooth marks, adult bones with fewer attack traces, armor showing damage, predator bones with injuries, trackways around water, sediments from drought. The mines are gone, but decisions leave statistical shadows. Paleopathology, the study of ancient injury and disease, adds another layer to these battlefields. Broken bones, infections, arthritis, punctures, healed fractures, and abnormal growth can reveal how hard dinosaur lives were. Some injuries may result from falls or accidents, others from fights with predators or members of the same species. The challenge is distinguishing cause without overclaiming. A broken rib does not automatically mean a predator attack. It could come from a fall, impact, trampling, intraspecific combat, or post-depositional damage if not healed. A skull injury may record display combat within a species rather than predation. A tail wound might be from a bite, a strike, or infection. The more detailed the healing and mark shape, the stronger the interpretation becomes. Tyrannosaurs themselves show injuries. Bite marks on tyrannosaur bones suggest face biting, conflict, or feeding by other tyrannosaurs. Some healed injuries indicate that individuals survived violent encounters. Predators fought their own kind over food, mates, territory, dominance, or simple proximity. The apex predator had no immunity from violence. It carried the battlefield in its own skull. Face-biting in theropods is especially evocative because it suggests living interactions between dangerous animals. A bite to the face is not a feeding trace in the usual sense if it healed. It may record combat, dominance, mating behavior, or territorial dispute. In living animals, dangerous mouths are often used against rivals as well as prey. For a tyrannosaur, another tyrannosaur may have been one of the few animals capable of inflicting serious damage. A healed tyrannosaur jaw is a different kind of survival fossil. The animal was not prey in the usual sense, but it was vulnerable. It hurt, healed, and continued. The scarred predator becomes less like an emblem and more like an individual, carrying marks from a life that included more than killing. Cannibalism has been proposed or documented in several theropod contexts where bite marks on predator bones match the teeth of the same or closely related taxa. Cannibalism is not unusual in nature. It can occur through scavenging, competition, stress, or predation. For dinosaurs, it should not be treated as monstrous. It is another possible feeding behavior in ecosystems where carcasses were valuable. The moral language we often attach to predation does not belong to these animals. Cruel, noble, savage, heroic, these are human categories. A hungry predator feeding on a carcass is not evil. A prey animal injuring a predator is not brave in the human sense. The fossil record becomes clearer when we set those categories aside and look at function, cost, opportunity, and survival. The end Cretaceous extinction adds a final shadow to these battlefields, but it should not consume them too early. For millions of years before the asteroid impact, dinosaurs were living complete lives. Tyrannosaurs did not know they were late. Hadrosaurs did not know they belonged to a final fauna. Nests were laid, teeth were shed, bones healed, tracks crossed mud, and predator-prey pressures continued as if the world would keep making room. Then, at the boundary, the rules changed too quickly. The impact near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula released energy on a planetary scale. Fire, darkness, cooling, acid rain, disrupted food webs, and collapsing plant productivity followed in different intensities across the globe. Non-avian dinosaurs disappeared. Birds, the surviving dinosaur lineage, crossed through. Crocodilians, turtles, mammals, amphibians, fish, insects, and plants survived unevenly. The old battlefields ended, but predation did not. After the extinction, mammals diversified into roles once held by many dinosaurs. Birds carried theropod ancestry into the modern sky, forests, wetlands, coasts, and cities. Every hawk gripping prey with talons, every heron striking fish,
every owl listening over snow, every crow inspecting a carcass belongs to a world where dinosaur predatory heritage did not vanish completely. It changed size, shape, and context. The Mesozoic battlefields are gone as living places. The rivers have shifted. The dunes are stone. The forests turned to coal, ash, or nothing. The shorelines moved inland and back again. But the evidence remains. A track, a tooth, a wound, a clutch, a quarry, a slab of limestone, a red sandstone fossil with two animals still tangled inside it. The battles ended. The traces did not. Some of the richest dinosaur battlefields are not built around predators at all. They begin with prey gathering in numbers so large that a landscape becomes organized around them. In the late Cretaceous of Alberta, bone beds of horned dinosaurs and duck-billed dinosaurs show that herbivores sometimes moved, lived, or died in great concentrations. These deposits are not simple scenes of attack. They are evidence of abundance, and abundance is what makes predators possible. A predator can only be common where prey supports it. Large tyrannosaurs required landscapes full of flesh, not just one dramatic kill now and then. Hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, juvenile dinosaurs, carcasses from seasonal die-offs, and smaller prey all contributed to the energy available. A top predator is the visible peak of a hidden pyramid. Beneath it are plants, insects, small vertebrates, herbivore herds, nesting grounds, diseases, floods, and drought. Consider a ceratopsian bone bed. The skulls alone can dominate imagination: frills, horns, beaks, cheekbones, nasal bosses, and roughened surfaces where skin and keratin once lay. But the story is not only in the skull. Limb bones show age and size. Sediment shows whether water moved bodies. Orientation can suggest current direction. Weathering indicates how long bones lay exposed. Tooth marks show whether predators or scavengers fed before burial. A mass of ceratopsian bones might represent a herd caught by flood, animals dying during drought, or remains accumulated by rivers. Each possibility changes the meaning. If a herd died together, the deposit says something about social life and catastrophe. If rivers assembled bones from scattered carcasses, the deposit says more about landscape processes. If predators fed heavily before burial, the deposit records another layer of interaction. The battlefield is the final arrangement of all these forces. The desire for a dramatic answer is understandable. A herd drowned in a flood is easier to picture than years of accumulation. A predator attack is easier to narrate than slow drought. But prehistoric life was not obligated to be simple. Many bone beds probably formed through combinations of death, decay, scavenging, transport, and burial. Their power lies in complexity, not in reduction. Drought is one of the most important unseen predators. It has no teeth, but it drives animals into dangerous places. Water shrinks. Food becomes concentrated and exhausted. Herds crowd together. Disease spreads. Mud traps the weak. Predators can wait near the remaining pools, conserving energy while prey must come to them. A drought-stricken waterhole can become a battlefield without a single chase across open ground. The signs of drought can be subtle in the fossil record: mud cracks, evaporite minerals, concentrated bones, repeated trampling surfaces, growth interruptions in plants, or sediment patterns indicating seasonal drying. Animals dying around water may be fed upon, scattered, and buried during later rains. When paleontologists uncover such deposits, they are reading the aftermath of stress that may have lasted months or years. Floods, by contrast, can kill suddenly and preserve quickly. A river rising after heavy rain can sweep away animals near its banks, bury carcasses in sand, or collect bones from upstream. Flood deposits can protect evidence from long exposure, but they can also mix animals that never interacted in life. A predator tooth in a flood deposit near a herbivore bone might mean feeding, or it might mean transport from separate locations. Sediment is both preserver and storyteller, but not always an honest witness. Volcanic ash adds another kind of preservation. It can fall quietly over a landscape, choking plants and water, or arrive as part of a fast-moving debris flow. In some Cretaceous deposits of northeastern China, sudden burial preserved animals with unusual completeness. A volcanic world is dangerous, but it can be generous to the fossil record. It stops time more quickly than ordinary decay allows. The Psittacosaurus and Repenomamus fossil belongs to that broader setting of sudden entombment. Its importance is not only the interaction itself, but the speed of burial implied by preservation. The skeletons remained intertwined. They were not dragged apart by scavengers, scattered by water, or separated by decay. The battlefield became sealed before the ordinary processes of death could edit it beyond recognition. Rapid burial also explains some articulated dinosaur skeletons found in lifelike poses. A body buried quickly can preserve the relationship between bones, even if soft tissue decays later. In other cases, opistotonic postures, where the neck and tail curve backward, may result from processes after death rather than the animal's final movement. Paleontologists must distinguish behavior from decay. A dramatic pose is not always a dramatic death. This caution is essential for any long view of dinosaur survival. The fossil record is not a camera. It is a filter. It favors hard parts, certain environments, certain body sizes, and certain kinds of burial. It misses countless chases, escapes, nest raids, night hunts, and deaths in forests where no sediment arrived in time. The battlefields we study are not all the battles that happened. They are the battles that geology allowed us to find. Think of how much is missing. A tyrannosaur track washed away before morning, a hadrosaur calf taken under conifers and consumed entirely, a nest raided by small mammals, the eggshell dissolved by soil chemistry, a feathered predator swallowed by a crocodilian in a river and leaving no recognizable bone, a sauropod juvenile dying under vegetation far from floodplain burial. These events shaped populations, but they left no museum specimen. What survives can therefore distort attention toward giants. Large bones are easier to preserve, easier to notice, easier to display. Yet most daily predator-prey interactions probably involved small and medium-sized animals. Insects feeding on plants, lizards eating insects, mammals raiding nests, small theropods catching mammals, juvenile dinosaurs fleeing mid-sized predators. The dinosaur age was built from these smaller transfers of energy as much as from tyrannosaur bites. A tiny jaw in a slab of shale may hold more ecological truth than a towering skeleton. It says that small animals were there, moving beneath the bodies of giants, participating in the same food web. A mammal tooth, a lizard vertebra, a small theropod claw, an eggshell fragment, a fish scale in a coprolite, these are the fine print of the Mesozoic. Coprolites can be especially direct. If a fossilized dropping contains crushed bone, plant fibers, fish scales, or other material, it records feeding more literally than many skeletons do. But assigning a coprolite to a maker is difficult unless size, content, location, and associated fossils point strongly in one direction. Even then, caution remains. The fossil shows what was eaten. It may not show who ate it with certainty. Bite marks face the same interpretive challenge. A U-shaped gouge, a puncture, a serration scratch, or a row of parallel marks can be compared with teeth from known predators. Sometimes the match is strong. Sometimes several animals could have made similar damage. Sometimes feeding after death creates marks that look violent, but do not record a hunt. Healing is the key when predation is the question. Healed bone is time made visible. It tells us that the animal's body responded. Blood vessels, cells, and growth processes moved into the injured area. New tissue formed. The wound stabilized. That healing may have taken weeks or months. When we see it millions of years later, we are not looking only at the attack. We are looking at recovery.
The hadrosaur bitten by a tyrannosaur did not become important because it died. It became important because it lived afterward. The same is true of predators with healed injuries. A theropod with a damaged foot that healed may have changed how it hunted. A ceratopsian with a healed frill wound may have survived combat. A rib fracture that repaired shows that pain did not immediately remove the animal from its world. Survival leaves texture. The most common battles may have been between bodies and ordinary difficulty. Infection, starvation, parasites, drought, injury, cold snaps, heat stress, storms, and failed nests all worked alongside predators. A predator may take the final bite from an animal already weakened by something else. A drought may create the opportunity for predation. A flood may bury the evidence. Life and death rarely belong to a single cause. This is why the title's three words belong together: predators, prey, and survival. Predators without prey are starvation. Prey without predators are still vulnerable to climate, disease, and competition. Survival is the temporary success of bodies navigating all of it. The Mesozoic was not a tournament. It was an immense, changing set of ecosystems where every advantage carried a cost. A predator's cost begins with hunger. Meat is rich, but it moves. It resists. It can injure the hunter. It may be absent when needed. Large predators require large territories or abundant prey. Young predators must learn what to attack and what to avoid. Old predators may lose speed or bite strength. A broken tooth may grow back eventually, but not always in time. A failed hunt spends energy that may not be recovered. A prey animal's cost begins with attention. Feeding requires lowering the head, focusing on plants, entering open ground, or staying near water. Vigilance takes time away from feeding. Group living reduces some risks, but creates competition and disease. Armor protects but slows. Speed helps escape, but limits size. Horns can defend, but require growth and maintenance. Survival is always an exchange. The landscapes themselves added constraints. Jurassic forests lacked flowering plants and grasses for most of the period, so herbivores fed on conifers, cycads, ginkgos, ferns, horsetails, and other non-flowering plants. Cretaceous ecosystems saw flowering plants spread and diversify, changing food resources, insect communities, and habitats. These plant changes mattered to predator-prey systems because every carnivore ultimately depends on plant productivity through the herbivores it eats. A plant community can shape teeth. Sauropods with simple cropping teeth processed plant matter in huge guts. Hadrosaurs evolved dental batteries for grinding and shredding vegetation. Ceratopsians used beaks and shearing tooth batteries. Ankylosaurs cropped low plants with broad bodies close to the ground. As herbivores changed how they fed, predators encountered different prey bodies, different herd structures, different age distributions, and different habitats. A Cretaceous floodplain with flowering shrubs, conifers, ferns, and broad-leaved plants would not feel like a Jurassic conifer cycad forest. It would have different cover, different seasonal signals, different insects, and perhaps different food patches. A predator moving through it would hunt through a changed visual field. A small prey animal would hide among different leaves. A nesting dinosaur would choose ground shaped by different roots. Flowering plants did not instantly replace older plant groups everywhere. The transition was gradual and uneven. Many Cretaceous landscapes still held conifers, ferns, cycads, ginkgos, and horsetails. The old and new overlapped. This matters because dinosaur ecosystems were mosaics, not single global stages. A species in Asia, North America, Africa, Europe, or South America lived within local plant communities and local predator guilds. In South America, titanosaurs reached enormous sizes during the Cretaceous, while large theropods such as Carcharodontosaurids and Abelisaurids occupied predatory roles at different times and places. In Africa, Spinosaurus and other predators lived near river systems with abundant fish and aquatic prey, complicating the simple image of land predators hunting only dinosaurs. In Asia, tyrannosauroids and oviraptorosaurs shared ecosystems with hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, and armored dinosaurs. The battlefields were global, but never identical. The title could be mistaken for a list of famous fights, but a global view shows something larger. Predator-prey relationships evolved differently on different continents as land masses separated, climates shifted, and lineages rose or vanished. A horn that worked in one ecosystem might not evolve in another. A predator body plan dominant in one region might be absent elsewhere. The Mesozoic was not one arena, it was many worlds under one era. In each of those worlds, a young animal still had to cross open ground. That simple act unites them. A hatchling sauropod in Jurassic North America, a Psittacosaurus in early Cretaceous China, a hadrosaur in late Cretaceous Montana, a small ornithopod on an island in Europe, a ceratopsian calf in Alberta. Each moved through a landscape where hunger watched from somewhere. Island environments added their own pressures. On islands, body sizes can change over evolutionary time. Some dinosaurs became smaller in restricted habitats, a phenomenon often called insular dwarfism. Smaller land areas, limited resources, and isolated populations can reshape herbivores and predators alike. A battlefield on an island may involve different prey sizes, different predator abundance, and different escape possibilities than a continental floodplain. In Europe, during parts of the Mesozoic, island chains and shallow seas created fragmented habitats. Dinosaurs there sometimes evolved under constraints unlike those in vast continental interiors. A smaller sauropod or ornithopod on an island still faced predation, but the predator guild might be limited. The landscape itself becomes part of defense and danger: coastlines, lagoons, narrow valleys, and limited ranges. Water remained a constant thread. Rivers offered drinking and plants, but also ambush. Lakes preserved delicate fossils, but in life they concentrated animals. Deltas shifted channels abruptly. Floodplains produced rich vegetation and dangerous mud. Coastlines recorded tracks and exposed animals to storms. Wherever water gathered life, it gathered death. A riverbank after rain may be the most Jurassic image of all. The mud is soft enough to hold a footprint. Ferns lean under droplets. Conifer needles gather in mats. A large herbivore has passed, leaving a round depression rimmed with displaced sediment. A smaller three-toed print cuts across it. The animals may never have seen each other. The stone will remember them together anyway. This is another way battlefields can mislead. Proximity in the fossil record is not always proximity in life. Two tracks on one surface may have been separated by minutes or hours, perhaps longer if the surface remained exposed. Two skeletons in one deposit may have died in different seasons and been transported together. The work of paleontology is partly the work of restoring time to places where geology has compressed it. Stratigraphy helps. Layers show sequence. Sediment structures show water flow, drying, ashfall, or channel migration. Bone orientation can reveal current direction. Articulation shows how much a body moved before burial. Weathering stages show exposure time. Microwear and histology reveal feeding and growth. Together, these methods prevent the fossil record from becoming only imagination. There is a quiet satisfaction in this. The ancient world is not reached by guessing harder. It is reached by noticing better. A scratch angle, a healed edge, a grain size, a footprint rim, a tooth replacement pattern, a pollen assemblage. Each detail is small, but enough small details can rebuild a lost ecosystem more faithfully than spectacle alone. The danger is not only exaggeration, it is simplification. To call Allosaurus a killer and Stegosaurus a victim misses the spike wound.
To call Tyrannosaurus only a scavenger misses the healed hadrosaur bite. To call Velociraptor a pack hunter without caution misses the limits of evidence. To call mammals insignificant misses Repenomamus. The fossil record keeps complicating the stories that seem too easy. Complexity is not a weakness. It is what makes the dinosaur age feel alive. Real ecosystems are full of exceptions. A small animal attacks a larger one. A predator scavenges. A prey animal wins the encounter and survives. A herd protects many, but loses some. A nest succeeds in one season and fails in another. The Mesozoic was not a script, it was life. The museum mount can sometimes hide all this. A skeleton stands clean and balanced, every bone supported by metal, every missing piece restored in careful symmetry. The animal looks complete, almost inevitable. But the living body was not clean. It had skin, parasites, scars, worn teeth, gut contents, fat, muscle, blood, and bacteria. It smelled. It breathed. It made choices in mud and heat. The same is true for prey skeletons. A mounted hadrosaur looks like a form. In life, it was an animal with daily pressures, finding food, keeping with others, avoiding deep mud, choosing nesting sites, recognizing alarm, responding to injury, and surviving seasons. The shape of its bones is not simply architecture. It is the outcome of a life spent moving through danger. A predator skull in a display case invites attention to teeth first. Teeth are easy to understand. They point, curve, and serrate. They imply penetration. But behind them are jaw muscles, skull joints, replacement patterns, senses, and feeding behavior. A tooth is only the visible edge of a whole predatory system. To understand the battlefield, the rest of the animal has to come back around it. Tyrannosaur teeth, for example, were thick compared with the blade, like teeth of many other theropods. They could endure high forces and puncture deeply. Allosaurus teeth were more knife-like, suited for cutting. Dromaeosaur teeth were smaller but effective, shed, and replaced as part of feeding. Each tooth type reflects a different relationship with prey, carcasses, and bone. The bite mark is the signature left after anatomy meets resistance. Bite force estimates are useful, but they should not become the whole story. A strong bite matters only when the animal can place it effectively. Neck strength, skull shape, tooth form, body position, prey movement, and risk all matter. A predator with a weaker bite may still kill through repeated cuts, gripping, blood loss, or targeting vulnerable areas. A predator with a crushing bite may still avoid prey that can injure it. The prey body answers with its own engineering. A ceratopsian skull spreads force through thick bone. An ankylosaur back protects soft tissue beneath osteoderms. A hadrosaur tail provides balance and power. A sauropod leg is a pillar that can become a weapon simply by stepping. A stegosaurus tail turns flexible muscle and bone into a swinging hazard. Defense is not always something added to the body. Sometimes the body itself is the defense. Injuries show the limits of that defense. A frill can be bitten. Armor can be damaged. A tail spike can wound, but not guarantee safety. Size protects adults, but not eggs. Herding reduces individual risk, but cannot remove it. Every defense is partial, which is why the arms race continues without reaching an endpoint. Predator-prey evolution is often described as if predators drive change and prey respond. In reality, both shape each other. A prey animal that becomes harder to catch changes predator behavior. A predator that hunts by ambush changes where prey feed. A herbivore that gathers in groups changes the strategy of predators and the plants it eats. A predator that scavenges large carcasses changes what remains for smaller animals. The system moves together. Fossils catch that movement only in fragments. A single wound can imply a whole encounter. A trackway can imply a crossing. A nest can imply a season. The humility of paleontology comes from knowing how little is preserved, and the wonder comes from how much can still be learned. Modern technology has made some traces easier to read. CT scanning can reveal internal structures without cutting fossils open. Microscopic analysis can identify healing, tooth serration marks, or growth patterns. Geochemical studies can investigate diet, environment, and movement in certain cases. Three-dimensional modeling can test bite mechanics, locomotion, and stress on bones. None of these methods removes uncertainty, but each narrows it. A Stegosaurus spike wound in an Allosaurus bone becomes more than a curious hole when compared with the shape, size, and angle of stegosaur tail spikes. A tyrannosaur tooth embedded in healed hadrosaur bone becomes stronger evidence when the surrounding tissue confirms survival. A trackway becomes more meaningful when sedimentology shows the surface was exposed briefly, not for years. Method turns drama into evidence. There is also evidence in tooth replacement. Predators shed teeth frequently because feeding is damaging. Herbivores replaced teeth because plants wear them down. In a quarry, shed theropod teeth scattered among herbivore bones may reveal feeding intensity. In a jaw, replacement teeth show how the animal maintained its tools. Survival depends not only on having teeth, but on renewing them before they fail. For a predator, a broken tooth is not a trivial inconvenience. If the animal depends on biting, cutting, and gripping, dental damage changes feeding. Replacement helps, but there is still a period when efficiency may drop. For prey, worn teeth can mean less food processed, slower growth, weaker condition, and greater vulnerability. Even chewing and biting belong to the larger battlefield. The role of juveniles deserves more attention because young animals are often where predator and prey systems are most active. Juveniles are numerous, vulnerable, and growing. They require food, but cannot yet use adult defenses fully. A young ceratopsian does not carry the full weaponry of an adult. A young ankylosaur lacks the complete armor mass or developed tail club. A young sauropod is far from the size refuge of adulthood. Predators also pass through juvenile stages. A young tyrannosaur was likely more lightly built than an adult, with different proportions and perhaps different prey. It may have hunted smaller, faster animals rather than crushing large bones. As tyrannosaurs grew, their ecological role shifted. This means a single species could exert different pressures at different life stages, from agile juvenile hunter to massive adult bone crusher. This ontogenetic shift may help explain how large predator species fit into ecosystems without every age class competing for the same prey. The young do not simply eat miniature versions of adult meals. Their bodies allow and limit different choices. A predator grows into power, and prey species encounter several versions of the same danger across time. A juvenile predator's footprint would be smaller, quicker, perhaps more lightly impressed. It might pass through vegetation that an adult could not enter easily. It might hunt near nests along forest edges or through crowded river margins. The adult's skeleton becomes famous, but the juvenile's life may have been more active, more vulnerable, and less often preserved. Vulnerability across life stages makes extinction and survival uneven. A species can lose many young and still persist if enough adults reproduce. But if environmental change disrupts nesting, plant growth, water availability, or juvenile survival, the population can decline even while adults remain visible for years. Predation is only one pressure, but it often interacts with all the others. The end of the Cretaceous shows this brutally. The impact did not need tyrannosaurs to lose battles one by one. It struck the base of ecosystems. Darkness reduced plant productivity. Food webs unraveled. Large animals requiring abundant resources suffered. Eggs, juveniles, adults, predators, and prey all became part of a collapsing system. Survival after that was not about horns or teeth. It was about ecology. Birds survived. Small bodies, flight, varied diets, seeds, aquatic resources, shelter, and chance may all have mattered in different ways. The surviving dinosaurs were not the largest or most armored or most terrifying. They were a branch of theropods that crossed through catastrophe and diversified afterward. The age of dinosaurs ended for non-avian forms, but dinosaur life itself did not vanish. This changes how we should see the word predator. A hawk is a dinosaur predator in the modern world. A heron spearing a fish carries theropod ancestry. A secretary bird stamping prey in grass. An owl taking a mouse in darkness. A gull scavenging at the shore. A crow opening a carcass. These are not Mesozoic scenes, but they are continuations of a lineage that once included feathered hunters under conifers and Cretaceous skies. The modern bird does not make Tyrannosaurus small, and Tyrannosaurus does not make the bird less real. They are different expressions of dinosaur history. One ended in the rocks of the late Cretaceous. The other lives in air, water, forest, and city. Predation continued by changing form. When we look back at dinosaur battlefields from the perspective of living birds, the Mesozoic feels less sealed away. A fossil claw becomes part of a longer experiment in grasping. A hollow bone becomes part of a history of breathing and lightness. A feather impression becomes both display and insulation, and eventually flight. Survival is not always the body winning a fight. Sometimes it is a lineage finding another way through time. But the non-avian dinosaur battlefields remain finished. No Triceratops lowers its horns today. No Allosaurus circles a sauropod carcass. No Velociraptor struggles in sand with Protoceratops. No Hadrosaur carries a Tyrannosaur tooth in its tail. The living continuation does not erase the extinction of those worlds. It only prevents the story from becoming absolute silence. The rocks hold what they can. In Utah, a predator-heavy quarry. In Texas, limestone trackways. In Mongolia, red sandstone around a struggle. In China, volcanic deposits around small animals caught in sudden burial. In Montana and the Dakotas, late Cretaceous floodplain sediments with teeth, horns, skulls, and healed wounds. Across the world, localities preserve fragments of the same broad truth: survival was lived in specific places. A specific place matters. The smell of wet mud. The slope of a bank. The cover at the forest edge. The depth of a pond. The firmness of sand. The distance from nest to water. The height of vegetation. The direction of wind. Animals do not live in eras. They live in places, moment by moment, with bodies that either meet those places successfully or fail. The Mesozoic lasted so long that no single image can contain it. The Triassic rise of dinosaurs, the Jurassic age of giants, and the Cretaceous flowering of diverse regional faunas each held countless predator-prey systems. Some were dominated by giant herbivores, some by armored prey, some by small, feathered hunters, some by tyrannosaurs with bone-crushing skulls, some by ecological relationships we have barely discovered. New fossils continue to change the story. A single specimen can reveal a behavior not previously confirmed. A new track site can show group movement in a lineage once thought solitary. A re-examined bone can turn an old break into evidence of healing. A microscopic study can identify tooth marks that were overlooked. The dinosaur battlefields are not closed chapters. They are active questions. This is part of their appeal. The world is gone, but it is not mute. It answers slowly, through stone, and sometimes it changes the answer. What seemed like a predator trap may become more complicated. What seemed like a clear fight may remain a fight but lose its simple motive. What seemed like a victim may show evidence of defense. What seemed like an apex predator may carry scars from its own kind. The best reconstructions respect that uncertainty. They do not drain the past of life. They keep the life grounded. A dinosaur battlefield should feel dangerous, but not theatrical. It should feel ancient, but not mystical. It should feel scientific, but not dead. The evidence itself is strong enough. Imagine one more scene on a late Cretaceous coastal plain. The day is warm, and the light is low. A herd of hadrosaurs moves along a river margin, feeding as it goes. Young animals stay near the center when the vegetation opens. Farther back, in trees and shadow, a tyrannosaur follows without rushing. It is not roaring, it is waiting, reading movement, conserving energy. Nothing may happen. The herd may cross safely. The predator may turn away. A storm may break before evening and erase every track, or one juvenile may fall behind, and the whole day changes. The fossil record is biased toward the day that changes, but most days did not end in preservation. They ended in survival, which leaves almost nothing. Survival is the missing majority of prehistory. Every fossil animal survived every day before the day it died. The bones show the end, but the body had a history before the end. Healed injuries, worn teeth, growth lines, muscle scars, reproductive maturity, perhaps years of successful feeding and avoidance. A skeleton is not just death. It is proof that life lasted long enough to build it. This is why a healed wound can feel more powerful than an unmarked bone. It interrupts the finality. It says this animal met danger once and continued. It says the battlefield did not always claim what it touched. In a world so often represented by extinction, survival deserves equal attention. Predators shaped prey, but prey shaped predators by surviving. A predator species cannot specialize on prey that is always easy, because easy prey disappears. The prey that remain are the ones with enough defense, behavior, reproduction, or luck to persist. The predator then evolves within the limits those survivors create. This back and forth is one of evolution's oldest conversations. In the Mesozoic, that conversation was written in enormous letters and tiny marks at the same time. A sauropod neck, a tyrannosaur tooth, a velociraptor claw, a psittacosaurus color pattern, a stegosaurus spike wound, a nest of eggs, a herd trackway, a healed tailbone. Each is a phrase from a language no living human heard spoken. To read that language, we return to physical anchors: mud, teeth, bone, sand, ash, eggshell, footprints, river sediment, frill fragments, tail clubs, feather impressions, quarry walls. These are the things that keep the ancient world from becoming abstract. They remind us that every grand statement about evolution began as something tangible in the ground. A fossil quarry can contain more time than any monument built by humans, not because it is older in a simple way, but because it holds layers of life, death, burial, erosion, discovery, and interpretation. The animals lived without knowing they would become evidence. The river buried them without purpose. The rock held them without memory. The scientist uncovered them with questions. The story is assembled only at the end. Assembled does not mean invented. The strongest reconstructions are bound by what the fossils allow. If the mark does not show healing, we do not call it a survived attack. If the trackways are separated by time, we do not force a chase. If several predators occur near one prey animal, we do not automatically call it a pack. Restraint is not the enemy of wonder. It is what keeps wonder trustworthy. And the trustworthy story is already vast. For more than 160 million years, non-avian dinosaurs lived with predation as a constant pressure. They evolved bodies of astonishing variety. They filled forests, floodplains, deserts, wetlands, coasts, and islands. They laid eggs, guarded or abandoned nests, grew quickly or slowly, moved alone or together, fought rivals, avoided danger, and died in ways both ordinary and spectacular. A single battlefield is too small for them. The whole Mesozoic was the field. Not a field of endless violence, but a field of living systems where hunger and caution met every day. The record left behind is incomplete, but not empty. It is enough to follow the edge of a footprint, the curve of a tooth, the healed swelling of bone, and the quiet space where an animal escaped. There is still another way to understand dinosaur battlefields, and it comes from scale. The animal in front of a predator is an individual. The population behind it is a pattern. A predator may fail many times and still survive if one hunt succeeds. A prey species may lose many individuals and still thrive if enough young reach maturity. The fossil record moves between those scales uneasily. One bone is personal. A bone bed is statistical. Both are real. A single Protoceratops locked with Velociraptor gives us an individual moment. A hadrosaur bone bed gives us population-level questions. A track site with many sauropod trails suggests movement across a landscape. A nest colony suggests reproductive behavior repeated many times. An embedded tooth shows one attack and one survival. None of these can stand for the entire Mesozoic alone, but together they build a layered view of life under pressure. The danger of focusing only on the most famous fossils is that the quieter evidence begins to disappear. A small theropod tooth near eggshell may be less dramatic than Tyrannosaurus biting a hadrosaur, but it may tell us more about daily risk. A patch of trampled mud may be less visually impressive than a mounted skeleton, but it may preserve more behavior. A healed injury in a small bone may be easy to overlook, but it carries the same basic truth as a giant wound. The animal lived after damage. The best dinosaur battlefield is not always the bloodiest one. It is the one that lets us ask better questions. Who was present? What kind of environment was this? Did the animals die together or accumulate over time? Were the bones exposed before burial? Are the marks from teeth, claws, trampling, weathering, or geological pressure? Is there healing? Are juveniles present? Are predators unusually common? Does the sediment show drought, flood, ash, or quiet water? These questions slow the scene down. Instead of rushing to an attack, we move through the evidence in the order it permits. First the rock, then the bones, then the marks, then the possible behavior. This is not less cinematic. It is more deeply cinematic because the camera moves closer. It studies the mud under the foot, the tooth in the bone, the edge of the wound, the angle of the track, the grain of the sandstone. A predator's life was shaped by patience as much as force, waiting near a water source, testing a herd, feeding quickly before a larger animal arrived, following scent, avoiding a prey animal that stood its ground, returning to a carcass after other scavengers had opened it further. These actions may not fit the simplest image of dinosaur combat, but they fit living predators. Hunger often rewards timing more than drama. Prey lived by timing too, leaving cover at the right moment. Drinking when the group was alert, moving young through risky ground before heat or darkness made danger worse. Choosing nest sites above flood level but near enough to food. Feeding fast, then lifting the head. A herbivore's world was not peaceful because it ate plants. Plants do not run, but the act of eating them can make an animal vulnerable. This is why herbivore senses mattered. Eyes placed to monitor broad surroundings, ears tuned to movement or calls, nostrils sampling air, skin feeling vibration through the ground in some limited way, and group response amplifying individual awareness. We cannot reconstruct all sensory details, but we can recognize that prey animals were active observers. The battlefield began before contact, in perception. Predators also perceived. Binocular vision in some theropods helped with depth. Smell may have guided tyrannosaurs to carcasses or living prey. Balance and inner ear structure influenced head movement and coordination. Feathers or display structures may have communicated with rivals or mates. These animals were not abstract sets of adaptations. They were sensing bodies, and predator-prey encounters began as information moving through air, ground, light, and scent. Many attacks probably ended before a bite. The prey noticed. The predator was too far away. The wind shifted. The herd closed ranks. The mud was wrong. Another predator appeared. The target looked healthy enough to be dangerous. The hunter stopped. These non-events almost never fossilize, yet they may have been the most common outcome. Evolution is shaped not only by deaths, but by avoided deaths. Avoided death is hard to honor in stone. It leaves no puncture, no embedded tooth, no articulated struggle. But a species' continued existence proves that avoided death happened countless times. Every adult sauropod was once a juvenile not taken. Every nesting hadrosaur was once an egg not raided. Every tyrannosaur with healed wounds was once a young predator that survived its own vulnerable years. The fossil record shows endings. Evolution requires the many escapes before them. This gives the Mesozoic a different emotional weight. It is not only the age of giants falling, it is the age of giants growing, not only the age of teeth closing, but of bodies moving away in time. A trackway can hold that feeling better than a skeleton. The animal is not dead in a footprint. It has just left. The track continues beyond the slab, even if the stone does not. The sauropod walked out of the preserved surface. The theropod crossed and kept going. The hadrosaur herd moved toward another patch of plants. The small animal at the edge of the mud vanished into cover. The end of the fossil is not the end of the life it records. For a channel about deep time, this distinction matters. The dinosaur age is often approached through extinction because extinction gives it a clear boundary. But most of the Mesozoic was not ending. It was ongoing. Animals did not live as preludes to fossils. They lived in weather, seasons, hunger, reproduction, and risk. Battlefields are valuable because they return motion to that ongoing world. A late Jurassic floodplain at dawn would not present itself as a battlefield. Mist might cling to low ground. Conifers would stand dark against a brightening sky. Ferns and horsetails would catch moisture. Insects would move before the heat rose. A sauropod might feed with slow sweeps of its neck. A smaller herbivore might step carefully among roots. Somewhere out of sight, a theropod might be resting, not yet hunting, simply part of the same morning. By midday, heat changes the choices. Animals move toward shade or water. Tracks deepen in soft places. Carcasses smell stronger. Scavengers become more active. Young animals tire sooner than adults. A predator might begin moving when the light angle's lower and the cover becomes more useful. The same landscape is not the same battlefield at every hour. Time of day changes risk. Seasons change it more. A wet season can spread animals across a landscape, making prey harder to predict and vegetation easier to find. A dry season can concentrate bodies around shrinking resources. Flood season can kill and preserve. Nesting season can create vulnerable clusters of eggs and young. Migration or long-distance movement, where it occurred, could expose animals to repeated crossings, unfamiliar ground, and predators waiting along routes. The fossil record sometimes lets us glimpse seasonality indirectly through growth rings, plant remains, sediment cycles, nesting horizons, and repeated track surfaces. These are not dramatic clues, but they matter. Predator-prey relationships are not fixed photographs. They shift with weather and season. A place safe one month may become dangerous the next because water, cover, or animal movement has changed. A shrinking pond near the end of a dry season may be one of the harshest battlefields. The mud is thick with prints. Fish die in warm, shallow water. Herbivores crowd the edge. Crocodilian eyes break the surface. Small theropods search the margins. Larger predators conserve energy in shade. Disease may move through stressed animals. One rainstorm could bury the evidence. Until then, survival is compressed around water. A sand dune field creates a different danger. Cover is limited. Tracks may vanish quickly. Heat and dryness stress bodies. Burrows, nests, and carcasses become focal points. The Velociraptor and Protoceratops fossil belongs to this dry logic. Sand preserved the struggle. But before burial, sand shaped how animals moved, hid, stumbled, and met. A battlefield is always local. A volcanic forest creates another. Ash can fall on leaves, contaminate water, and preserve fine details. Debris flows can bury animals suddenly. Lakes can trap delicate bodies in quiet sediment. Feathered dinosaurs, small mammals, insects, and plants can be preserved together. Such deposits reveal that predator-prey relationships were not limited to the large and obvious. They were woven through the understory. Across these settings, the Mesozoic becomes less like a single age and more like a planet of connected theaters. Not theaters in the sense of performance, but places where life played out under different rules. A Jurassic river plain, a Cretaceous dune field, a Chinese volcanic forest, a coastal margin in Texas, a northern floodplain near an inland sea. Each holds a different balance of hunger and defense. The fossils do not bring those places back completely. They cannot restore the exact sounds, colors, temperatures, or smells, but they restore enough. A body size, a footfall, a feeding trace, a wound, a clutch, a burial event. These are the handles by which the vanished world can be lifted slightly into view. The strongest feeling at the end of this subject is not violence, it is proximity. A tooth mark brings two animals close. A trackway brings a foot close to mud. A nest brings an embryo close to hatching. A healed wound brings an ancient body close to pain and recovery. The fossil record is separated from us by deep time, but the physicality of these traces narrows the distance. We will never know the whole life of the hadrosaur that survived a tyrannosaur bite. We will never know whether the velociraptor was desperate, experienced, starving, or unlucky. We will never know how many young sauropods vanished before one became enormous. We will never know how many attacks failed in the shade before any bone was marked. The unknown is not empty. It surrounds the evidence like the lost forest around a single leaf impression. What we have is enough to be careful with. A bone with a wound, a slab with footprints, a quarry wall dense with remains, a nest in sediment, a tooth shed at a carcass, a fossil pair caught in struggle. These pieces do not need to be made louder. Their age is loud enough. Their survival through stone is already improbable. The Mesozoic battlefields were not arenas built for spectacle. They were ordinary places made dangerous by need. Predators needed food. Prey needed food, water, safety, and time. Young animals needed growth. Adults needed strength. Nests needed protection or concealment. Rivers needed to flow. Dunes needed to move. Ash needed to fall. And sometimes those processes caught life in the act of being life. In the end, survival was never permanent. Every individual lost it. The largest sauropod, the sharpest theropod, the best armored ankylosaur, the fastest juvenile, the most watchful hadrosaur, the strongest horned dinosaur, all eventually died. But species and lineages continued when enough individuals survived long enough. That is the difference between a wound and an extinction, between a failed hunt and a vanished world. The non-avian dinosaurs endured for more than 100 million years within that difference. They were not fragile experiments. They were among the most successful land animals in Earth history. Their battlefields did not destroy them. For most of their reign, those battlefields were part of the system that sustained them, selecting, pruning, feeding, pressuring, and renewing ecosystems across the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. Only at the end did a force arrive that no armor, herd, bite, claw, horn, or tail club could answer. The impact and its aftermath changed the planet beyond the scale of ordinary predator and prey. The old negotiations failed. Food webs broke faster than large animals could adapt. The great non-avian dinosaur battlefields closed, not because one predator won, but because the world that held both predator and prey was transformed. Still, the stone remains. It carries the smaller endings. A chase that may have happened. A fight that almost certainly did. A bite that healed. A carcass that fed many mouths. A herd that crossed mud. A nest that held eggs. These are not the final extinction. They are the daily history that came before it, the long, ordinary struggle that made the dinosaur age real. The work of finding these traces is slower than the lives they represent. A field crew may spend days removing rock from around a single bone, mapping its position, recording its angle, photographing the sediment, and protecting fragile surfaces with consolidant. A tooth mark that becomes important in a paper may first appear as a small irregularity under dust. A trackway may require low sunlight, water, or careful scanning before its shapes become clear. The ancient battlefield does not reveal itself all at once. The quarry is also a modern landscape. Heat rises from stone. Wind pushes grit into notebooks. Tools make small sounds against rock. Plaster jackets dry around bones that have not seen open air since the Cretaceous. Someone labels a fragment that looks unimpressive but may later become the missing piece of a larger question. Science often advances through fragments that do not look dramatic when they are first lifted from the ground. A fossil preparator may then spend months under magnification, removing grains of matrix from around bone. The preparation lab becomes another kind of excavation, quieter and more controlled. A scratch that looked geological in the field may prove to be a tooth mark. A crack may show healing. A surface hidden under stone may preserve skin, feather, or eggshell texture. What seems like a single fossil can continue opening for years. This slow work matters because ancient behavior is so easy to overread. A dramatic fossil can pull interpretation ahead of evidence. Careful preparation pulls it back. It asks what the bone actually shows, what the sediment actually records, and what alternative explanations remain. The result may be less simple, but it is stronger. A restrained conclusion can carry more weight than a spectacular guess. The public often meets dinosaurs after this process is finished, when the fossil is behind glass or rebuilt as a mounted skeleton. By then, the uncertainty may be hidden. The label gives a name, a period, a place, perhaps a short note about diet. But behind that clean display are decisions, debates, measurements, comparisons, and sometimes revisions. The battlefield in the museum is not only ancient, it is also the product of modern interpretation. Some specimens change meaning as science changes around them. A mark once dismissed as damage may become evidence of feeding. A fossil once thought to show one species may be reassigned. A trackway once imagined as a chase may be read more cautiously. A bone bed once explained as a predator trap may become a more complex story of environment and accumulation. This is not failure. It is how evidence remains alive. The past does not change, but our reading of it does. New fossils add context. New techniques reveal hidden structures. Old assumptions become testable. The dinosaur battlefield is not a fixed illustration printed once and left unchanged. It is a reconstruction under revision, anchored to the same bones but sharpened by new questions. There is humility in that, and also excitement. Somewhere, still covered by rock, there may be another direct interaction fossil, another healed wound, another track surface showing movement at a moment of risk, another nest with evidence of disturbance, another coprolite with unexpected contents. The known record is remarkable, but it is not complete. Deep time still has sealed rooms. Future discoveries may not be the ones people expect. They may not be larger predators or more spectacular fights. They may be small animals, juvenile bones, eggshell chemistry, bite marks from obscure carnivores, or footprints showing ordinary movement. A tiny fossil can change a large idea if it captures a behavior that was previously only guessed. The Mesozoic still has room to surprise without becoming fantasy. The most important future battlefield may be a surface no one has noticed yet, a bedding plane under desert varnish, a coastal slab revealed by erosion, a quarry layer below a famous bone bed, a thin ash horizon in a hillside, a museum drawer holding a bone collected decades ago. Discovery is not always a new expedition into untouched wilderness. Sometimes it is a second look at what has already been found. A museum drawer can be its own landscape. Specimens rest in trays with numbers, localities, and old handwriting. A tooth, a vertebra, a claw, a piece of frill, a fragment of rib. Some were collected before modern questions were asked. When they are re-examined, they may reveal details overlooked by earlier workers. The battlefield can reappear under fluorescent light, not just under desert sun. This is fitting. Dinosaur survival was not always spectacular, and neither is the work of understanding it. Both depend on persistence. A body grows through repeated days. A species survives through repeated generations. A scientist understands a fossil through repeated looking. The past becomes clearer through patience. A living bird on a windowsill can bring the subject close again. It tilts its head, watches with quick attention, grips with toes, and moves with the lightness of a theropod inheritance transformed. It is not a velociraptor, and it is not a tyrannosaurus, but it belongs to the same broad dinosaur story. Its survival does not resurrect the old battlefields, but it reminds us that extinction was not the only ending written at the Cretaceous boundary. The bird also reminds us that predator and prey are still present tense realities. A hawk above a field, a gull at a carcass, a crow investigating a road, a heron standing motionless in water. These scenes are not Mesozoic, but they echo the same ecological principles. Hunger, caution, opportunity, risk, and recovery continue. The actors have changed. The grammar remains. Looking back, the Mesozoic feels immense because its animals are gone, but it was made from the same basic pressures that shape life now. Food must be found. Bodies must be protected. Young must survive. Injuries must heal or become fatal. Environments shift. Catastrophes arrive. The dinosaur battlefields are ancient, but the rules beneath them are not alien. They are life under conditions we can still recognize, enlarged across deep time. That recognition should not make the dinosaurs ordinary. It should make them more real. Allosaurus was not less astonishing because it scavenged as well as hunted. Stegosaurus was not less remarkable because its plates may have served display as well as other functions. Tyrannosaurus was not diminished by practical feeding behavior. Protoceratops was not merely a victim because one fossil preserves a fight. Real animals are always more interesting than symbols. So the battlefield narrows again to evidence, not the grand image first, but the object. The object is where trust begins. A tooth, a print, a scar, a nest, a bone bed. Each one asks for attention before imagination. Each one is a piece of the ancient world that did not vanish when the animals did.
Even the word survival changes meaning when placed against deep time. For an individual, survival is immediate. One more breath, one more step, one more night without being found. For a species, survival is reproductive. Enough nests, enough hatchlings, enough juveniles entering adulthood. For an ecosystem, survival is continuity through disturbance. Rivers shifting, plants regrowing, predators finding prey, scavengers returning nutrients, and populations recovering after hard seasons. A single dinosaur never experienced the Mesozoic. It experienced weather. It experienced hunger. It experienced the body it had at that age and the place it occupied that day. A young animal did not know it was part of a lineage extending millions of years into the future. A predator did not know it was shaping evolution. It only encountered a moving body, a scent, a sound, a chance, a risk. The scale we see now was built from those small moments. This is why physical evidence matters so much.
It keeps deep time from becoming only a number. 200 million years is too large to feel directly. A footprint can be felt. A tooth can be measured. A healed wound can be understood. A nest can be counted. A quarry layer can be touched. The mind cannot hold the whole Mesozoic at once, but it can return to objects and let them stand for the vanished world without pretending they contain all of it. Somewhere in that vanished world, most moments left nothing behind. A predator missed and the prey vanished through conifers. A herd crossed firm ground that took no prints. Rain erased a track before sediment arrived. A carcass decayed on soil that dissolved the bones. A nest hatched successfully, and the shells broke into pieces too small to preserve. These lost events are not failures of the story. They are the reason the surviving evidence feels so rare. The fossils we do have are therefore not windows in a clean wall. They are cracks in a cliff face, narrow openings through which a much larger landscape can be glimpsed. The view is partial, but it is real. Through one crack, we see a fight in sand. Through another, a herd crossing mud. Through another, a predator tooth inside healed bone. Through another, a small mammal gripping a young dinosaur in volcanic sediment. Each opening reveals a different kind of survival. Taken together, they show that the dinosaur age was not ruled by teeth alone. It was ruled by interaction. Plants and herbivores, predators and scavengers, nests and raiders, rivers and bones, ash and forests, climate and growth. Predation was one thread, but it ran through many others. Pull on it, and the whole ecosystem begins to move. Return to the bone where we began. The wound is still there, dark and mineralized, held in a surface that once lived inside a body. Around it, the rock is silent. No predator stands nearby. No prey animal turns to flee. The mud has hardened. The forest is gone. The river has changed its course beyond recognition. But the mark remains. Teeth met bone. The animal endured, or did not. Sediment covered the evidence. Time buried the sediment. Erosion opened it again. Now the battlefield is small enough to hold in two hands, and old enough to contain a world.